Amy Beth Lord was born on December 21, 1988, in Springfield, Massachusetts. Her family moved to Wilbraham shortly after her birth, where she grew up with her two close sisters, Kimberly and Carly. The siblings shared a strong bond and enjoyed a loving family environment. After graduating high school in 2007, Amy pursued higher education at Bentley University, focusing on humanities, business, and marketing. Thanks to her remarkable intellect, she excelled academically and earned her bachelor's degree in 2011, becoming a certified marketer. Following her studies, Amy aimed to kickstart her career, relocating to Boston, Massachusetts. There, she quickly found a position as an internet marketing specialist and worked for 2 years. Life was going well. She made close friends and was in a relationship with Mike Cassell, with whom she was planning to start a family. On July 23, 2013, at 5:38 a.m., 24-year-old Amy was in the lobby of her apartment building. She had woken up early to meet her friend and co-worker, Christina Kelleher, for a gym session at 6 a.m. However, when Amy didn't arrive, Christina waited at the bus stop for a while before deciding to go to the gym alone, assuming her friend had overslept and didn't want to wake her. Although Amy was usually very punctual, Christina wasn't too concerned and expected to see her at work later, as their desks were next to each other. After finishing her workout, Christina was surprised to find that Amy was still not at the office. Feeling alarmed, she reached out to Mike, Amy's boyfriend, to check if he knew where she was. He had no idea and mentioned that he assumed Amy had gone to the gym. Over several hours, Mike and Christina tried repeatedly to reach Amy, but they were unsuccessful. At 11:30 a.m., Christina decided to contact the office manager. They had already called all of Amy's friends and acquaintances, but no one knew her whereabouts. Consequently, the management opted to report her missing to the police. After taking the report, the officers contacted Amy's parents, who had also not seen her. They agreed to meet with her relatives at her apartment in South Boston to investigate further, which happened around 2 p.m. Detectives searched the apartment for any evidence of a struggle, robbery, or other criminal activity, but found nothing out of order. Everything appeared to be in its place, and the locks were secure. It seemed that Amy had simply vanished. Her family emphasized that she led a happy and organized life. She had no plans for sudden trips and wouldn't have run away without informing anyone. They believed something must have happened to her. A contact lens belonging to Amy was discovered in the building's foyer, and there were also marks on the nearby wall that suggested a possible confrontation. To gather more information about Amy, police interviewed her parents in detail. They revealed that Amy was driving a black Jeep Cherokee SUV. Shortly after, an officer recalled that at 8:37 a.m. in southern Boston, a fire had been reported. At that location, they found an SUV fully engulfed in flames. The fire department extinguished the fire and then towed the vehicle for further investigation. The car's description matched Amy's SUV. She had not yet been officially reported missing at that time. Although the license plates were completely burned away, the lab was able to identify the chassis number of the burned vehicle, confirming that it belonged to Amy Lord. Detectives returned to the station and started verifying Amy's bank transaction data. They discovered that her bank cards had been used to withdraw money 5 times that morning, beginning at 6 a.m. The total amount withdrawn was approximately $1,000, and the withdrawals were made from different ATMs. This raised suspicions because it was unusual to withdraw money repeatedly from various locations in the city. The first transaction took place near her apartment. When the police arrived, they noticed a surveillance camera beside the ATM. They reviewed the footage, hoping to spot Amy in the morning recordings and gain insights into what happened. The process of reviewing the footage took considerable time, and officers examined recordings from all the ATMs where Amy's card had been used. They also found additional surveillance equipment on nearby buildings. All this evidence was gathered to piece together a clear timeline of events from that morning. While police were working with banks to collect footage, They received a call around 4 p.m. from a cyclist who had found a body at the Stony Brook Reservation in Hyde Park. The body was that of a young woman. Upon arrival, detectives discovered the victim was naked and had suffered over 40 stab wounds, primarily to her neck, face, and chest. There were also hand marks on her throat, suggesting she had been strangled. Her body was dumped in a secluded area covered with foxes, far from the city, but the killer did not attempt to conceal it. No identification was found. However, based on police photographs, they believed the victim was Amy Lord. Once her identity was confirmed, the missing person case transitioned into a murder investigation. The analysis of the CCTV recordings from the ATMs has been completed. The first sighting of Amy was at 6:35 a.m. She appeared alone at the ATM in her workout clothes and appeared uninjured. She used her ATM card and left. At 6:47 a.m., she arrived at another ATM just a few blocks away. This time, the camera captured her car from the outside. Amy was again unharmed and wearing sportswear. She withdrew cash by herself. However, her behavior was unusual. The police observed that, while the car was parked outside the bank, she was sitting in the passenger seat instead of the driver's seat. About 7 minutes later, she appeared in another video, this time with visible facial injuries, including a broken nose and several bruises, indicating she had been attacked. It seemed she had been kidnapped, yet she did not attempt to escape. Amy withdrew cash again and returned to the car, remaining in the passenger seat. Detectives tracked the car's movements throughout the city and obtained more recordings in an effort to identify the driver. The first shot showing Amy in the passenger seat and the driver behind the wheel was captured at 6:10 a.m. This helped them establish a timeline of events, but they still could not identify the driver's face. While reviewing the footage, the police noticed that the driver was hiding his face, possibly with a t-shirt or a headband. He wore a cap, and in one clip, when he adjusted it, it showed that he had a clean-shaven head. Detectives needed to find the exact moment Amy was abducted, so they continued gathering information from CCTV cameras. This effort led them to capture the moment Amy left her apartment. As soon as she opened the door, she was attacked by an unknown man who had been waiting outside. Pacing back and forth, he forced her inside, and they stayed behind the closed door for about 15 minutes. At 5:52 a.m., both of them came out and walked toward Amy's car. This suggests that the first cash withdrawal happened while she was being threatened. This information helped the police piece together the sequence of events. As soon as she left her apartment, preparing for a workout before heading to work, she was kidnapped. The attacker likely persuaded her that if she gave him enough money, he would let her go. As a result, Amy did not resist and complied with his demands. After withdrawing the required amount from her card, she was taken out of town and attacked with a knife. Following the murder, her body was left in a wooded area, and her car was set on fire. The police were unable to obtain a clear image of the suspect's face. Investigators questioned Amy's relatives to check if anyone might have wanted to harm her, but she had no known enemies. Her boyfriend had a strong alibi and was ruled out as a suspect. The attacker needed gasoline to set the car on fire. In the video footage from when the attack started, the attacker was not seen carrying anything that looked like fuel. Therefore, he must have bought it at a gas station. After the attack, he drove 10 kilometers to a country park to dispose of the body before returning. Detectives reviewed all intersections with cameras where the perpetrator might have been seen. The investigation was challenging because the victim drove a common car. There were hundreds, if not thousands, of black SUVs in the city, but her relatives pointed out a distinctive clue, a cloverleaf-shaped sticker on the rear window. This made it easier to track her car in traffic and locate the gas station where the attacker had stopped. Unfortunately, the surveillance camera at that station wasn't working. Detectives noticed a liquor store across the street that had a front camera. They obtained some footage, but it was too distant to clearly see the criminal's face. At around 8 a.m., the suspect arrived at a gas station without Amy. The car was recognizable because of a cloverleaf-shaped sticker. Although the driver's face was not seen, he waved at someone and approached another person. They exchanged a few words, shook hands, and then the suspect's companion left. Fortunately, this person came closer to the liquor store's CCTV camera, allowing him to be identified. The police located him, had a conversation, and he revealed that he met his friend, 28-year-old Edwin Alamany, near the gas station. At 8 a.m., Edwin was in a black SUV that had not been seen before. He previously worked as a waiter's assistant and was currently unemployed. Early in the morning, on July 23, 2013, around 4:23, another resident of South Boston, Alexandra Cruz, was attacked just before Amy was kidnapped. Alexandra was walking to her job at Dunkin' Donuts when a stranger assaulted her in the parking lot, hitting her in the jaw and causing her to briefly lose consciousness. The attacker then began to strangle her, but suddenly stopped, claiming he had made a mistake and was looking for someone else. He threatened to kill her if she screamed. He took her valuables and turned away for a moment, giving her the chance to escape. Despite his threat that she would be killed if she reported him, Alexandra did not keep quiet. Once she arrived at work, she called the police. About an hour later, an officer came to take her statement, and they created a composite sketch of the assailant. During the investigation at Amy's apartment, the police received another urgent call. Around midnight in South Boston, a girl was stabbed. Detectives quickly recognized that this crime occurred near Amy Lord's apartment. This led them to believe they were dealing with a serial attacker, as there had already been 3 similar incidents involving girls. The investigation needed to continue, as the officers received a new call. 21-year-old Kaylee Ballantyne was attacked shortly after midnight. She was the only daughter in her family, raised alongside 2 older brothers, which may have contributed to her ability to defend herself. Her parents described her as a fighter from a young age. All the children in the family were athletic, but despite her delicate appearance, Kaylee displayed remarkable strength, sometimes even outdoing her brothers. In 2003, when she was just 11, she faced a serious incident when a basketball backboard fell on her head, leaving her in a coma for a month. Fortunately, she survived, recovered fully, and even resumed playing hockey. When the police spoke with the victim of the latest attack, Kaylee was injured, but still alive and able to recount her night. She had been working and was heading home around midnight. With her headphones on, she didn't notice any danger right away. As she approached her apartment, she noticed a suspicious-looking man on the opposite side of the street. He was large and appeared to be watching her. Then, he crossed over to her side, stopped, and stared at her for about 5 seconds. This made her feel uneasy, so Kaylee hurried her steps. She got to her apartment and went to enter the code to get in. Initially, she entered it wrong, but got it right on the second try. When Kaylee opened the door, the man was right behind her. He put his hand on her left shoulder and pushed her through the door, his right hand holding a knife to her head. Kaylee fell to the floor, and the attacker pushed down on her, sitting on top of her. She pleaded for her life, asking him to take anything he wanted, but he began to stab her without saying a word. In a desperate attempt to protect herself, Kaylee crossed her left arm over her chest and started to fight back with her right hand. She also kicked at him. During the struggle, she successfully knocked the attacker's hand away, causing him to accidentally hurt himself and loosen his grip. Sports weren't merely a hobby for Kaylee. She was a professional athlete, strong and resilient, which helped her find the strength to fight back. This moment gave her the opportunity to save her life. After her attacker fell backwards and walked away. As he walked away, Kaylee slammed the door behind him so he couldn't come back. She remembered that she didn't know how many times she had been stabbed and that she didn't really feel any pain when it happened. She tried to stand up, but she collapsed and her chest tightened. She wondered if it was her adrenaline, if she was dying, and knew she needed to get into her apartment. Kaylee said that for some reason, her apartment key was in her pocket, which made it much easier, so she crawled to the apartment door, unlocked it, and went inside. Once inside, she crawled to her first roommate's room and told her that she had just been stabbed and that she needed her to get towels, tissues, or anything to stitch up the wound and then call 911. She insisted on calling her loved ones, worried that she might not make it through the attack. Her friends stayed calm and encouraged her to call emergency services first. Meanwhile, the neighbor took a video of everything Kaylee said. Remarkably, she managed to remain calm, even though she had sustained serious injuries: 2 stab wounds to her face and 2 to her neck. In total, the attacker had stabbed her 9 times, with 1 wound puncturing her left lung and another coming dangerously close to her heart. The trial of Edwin Alemany started in 2015 and lasted for 14 days. The key witness for the prosecution was Kaylee, the survivor. During her testimony, she displayed such inner strength that Edwin could not even look her in the eye. Alexander Cruz, the first victim, also testified against him. Edwin's defense attorney attempted to downplay his violent behavior, arguing that Edwin had tried to end his own life by cutting his wrists, which resulted in scratches on his neck and arms. Ultimately, Edwin was found guilty of first-degree murder for Amy's death, armed robbery, aggravated assault with a weapon, and attempted murder of Kaylee Ballantyne and Alexander Cruz. He never accepted responsibility or showed any regret for his actions. On June 9, 2015, he was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole for the murder of Amy and received an additional 35 years for the attacks on Kaylee and Alexander. When Kaylee gave her final statement, she shared her challenges in trying to live a normal life. Her heartfelt words brought many people in the courtroom to tears. Amy's parents gave Kaylee their late daughter's necklace as a token of gratitude for her testimony, which helped convict a dangerous criminal. However, Edwin, the criminal, never showed any remorse. In October 2020, he approached a federal judge to complain that his lawyers had been ineffective by opting for an insanity defense and admitting his guilt without his consent, despite him claiming he was innocent. In 2021, the state Supreme Court upheld his conviction. Edwin then hired a new lawyer and tried to formulate a different strategy to gain immediate release by pointing out the mistakes made by his previous attorney and the prosecution. However, these attempts were unsuccessful. After Kaylee recovered from her injuries, she returned to school and graduated from university. She lived in Boston until Edwin's case was resolved. After that, she decided to move to California to find peace away from big cities, hoping to cope with her post-traumatic stress disorder. Gradually, she healed from her psychological trauma and even began to dream again, which felt like a significant achievement. During this period, she felt intense anger towards Edwin for taking Amy's life and nearly ending hers too. Kaylee struggled to understand what could drive someone to such senseless cruelty. Over time, however, she began to feel pity for Edwin, recognizing the flaws in his character that led to his actions. Eventually, she wrote him a letter of forgiveness, but never sent it. It remained in her desk for 2 years. Then Kaylee tried to contact Edwin's lawyer, but received no response. Later, during a sermon about forgiveness at her church, she was reminded of the man who nearly took her life. Coincidentally, the pastor was visiting the prison where Edwin was held, so Kaylee asked him to deliver her letter. 2 weeks later, she received a response. In his letter, Edwin discussed his hard childhood. He was born in Puerto Rico and moved to the United States without speaking English. He shared the difficulties he encountered both at work and in his personal life, including experiences of bullying during his childhood. These challenges resulted in behavioral issues that ultimately led to him being in juvenile prison for a significant part of his youth. Initially, Kaylee felt compassion for him after reading the letter, but a few weeks later, she discovered that he was trying to appeal his case, claiming that his tough upbringing had broken him. This revelation made her question his sincerity, as she suspected he was trying to gain her sympathy. As a result, she decided not to reply to him. In the end, his appeal was denied, and he remains in prison. Kaylee hopes he is attending school and working on self-improvement. She believes he didn't ruin her life. Instead, he improved it. Kaylee has decided to turn her circumstances into something positive and feels happier than ever. Even though she faces daily anxiety and various challenges, she continues attending therapy and strives to maintain a positive outlook. After spending some time in California, she returned to Maine, where she currently resides. As a public speaker, she shares her story to inspire and support others who have experienced trauma. About a year ago, she stepped back from public speaking and is now seeking new ways to share her message. Kaylee feels passionate about her story because it has the potential to connect with others and create positive change in their lives. Currently, she works in marketing, is in a loving relationship, and has recently purchased her first home. Hi everyone. Thanks for returning. Let's unravel another horrible case. The case of Ashley Scott. Ashley, born on November 4, 1978, in Bossier City, Louisiana, is a kind-hearted individual. Her parents divorced while she was still in her mother's womb. However, her mother, Donna, later married Jimmy, who adopted she and loved her greatly. Jimmy had a biological daughter named Kia from a previous relationship. Unfortunately, Jimmy and Donna's marriage ended in divorce a few years later, primarily because Donna chose to leave. Ashley decided to stay with her father, Donna, but she continued to maintain a relationship with her mother. Even though Ashley's parents are divorced, she enjoyed a happy childhood. She was known for her kindness and obedience, and those around her recognized her beauty and potential. In 1996, she graduated from high school and went on to attend UAA Baptist University in Arkansas. There, she met her first love, Jeffrey Scott, who had also enrolled at the same university. Jeffrey was captivated by her beauty and warm smile, and soon they began dating. They are a beautiful couple, often holding hands and enjoying time together. Ashley's friends admired her and believed she had found a wonderful partner, as she often shared stories about how sweet and kind Jeffrey was and how fortunate she felt to be with him. In 2000, Ashley received the college degree she had always dreamed of. She pursued her dream of becoming a teacher and dedicated her life to education. However, her wedding to Jeffrey on June 9, 2001, was marred by some hidden problems. Although it appeared to be a joyous occasion on the surface, but some disturbing aspects of Jeffrey were apparent to everyone, and Ashley knew about them but chose to ignore them. A year prior to the wedding, Ashley had written to her sister, stating that she could no longer maintain communication with the family and requested they respect her choice. As a result, her family was not invited to the wedding. Ashley's friends were surprised to see that most of the guests were from Jeffrey's family, even though Ashley's family is very close and large. Initially puzzled, they later understood the situation. Her family disapproved of Jeffrey, and he made no effort to win them over. Underneath his friendly exterior, he often speaks ill of her family and acts inappropriately. Jeffrey offended those close to Ashley and believed he had every right to do so. What was most surprising was Ashley's reaction. It seemed like she was making excuses for his behavior. At the wedding, Jeffrey insulted some of her friends again and acted arrogantly. After they moved to Cordova, a suburb of Memphis, Tennessee, Ashley's relationships with many people began to deteriorate. The darker side of Jeffrey started to show. After the move, he began working as a computer systems technician at his father's company, while Ashley became an English teacher at a middle school. Everyone praised her. She was seen as beautiful, cheerful, intelligent, and sociable. She loved her job and her students. Paul Dealey, a colleague, later described her as an experienced teacher. He mentioned in court that she was the main reason he looked forward to going to English class each day. He admits that school was the only place she felt safe and loved. It was where she could escape from Jeffrey. As time went on, the relationship between Ashley and Jeffrey worsened. and her connection with her family nearly fell apart. She refused to discuss it, claiming it was her personal choice. These were certainly influenced by her husband Jeffrey, who was a master manipulator. In the early years of their marriage, he completely controlled her and isolated her. His constant criticism, even on trivial matters, hurt her self-esteem. He tried to control she in every way possible. During this time, she only communicated with a few people, including her childhood friend, Lori. They had been friends since 5th grade and remained in touch into adulthood. In September 2006, Ashley attended a school reunion that she was excited about. While the others at the event didn't notice anything unusual about her, Lori was worried throughout the evening. Jeffrey kept calling Ashley, making it impossible for her to relax and enjoy the class reunion. He questioned her about who she was talking to, what she was wearing, what she was eating and drinking, and what conversations she was having. Essentially, he tried to control every aspect of her life. That night, Ashley confided in Lori about the nightmare she was experiencing and expressed that she couldn't continue living like this. She revealed that she was thinking about divorce and had even reached out to an attorney. Ashley also admitted that she knew about Jeffrey's affairs, including an affair with a colleague named Blair Brown, someone she used to be very close to. Over time, she had forgiven Blair, who had contacted her to reveal Jeffrey's true nature and how dangerous he could be. This class reunion became the last social event Ashley attended. After that, she was isolated for several weeks, and new bruises began to appear on her body. On November 23, 2006, at 3:46 p.m., a call was made to emergency services in Memphis, Tennessee. When 911 dispatcher answered, they were surprised by the calmness of the caller, Jeffrey Scott. He reported that his wife had passed out at 11:00 a.m., but a voice in the background said she might be dead. The dispatcher asked for clarification, and he stated that his wife had been breathing moments before, but now appeared to be dead. What was remarkable about the call was that Jeffrey did not appear distressed, his voice remaining calm throughout the conversation. Recognizing the possibility of a crime, the dispatcher immediately alerted the leadership, and police were dispatched to the scene. Within minutes of receiving a call, police arrived at the given address. Upon arrival, they were greeted by their host, Jeffrey. He then showed them to his wife's bedroom, Ashley. Inside, they found a man, Robert McGee, a friend of Jeffrey's, was performing CPR on Ashley. Dr. Robert informed the police that she was still alive, but her health condition was critical, with her pulse and blood pressure being very low. Upon closer inspection, medical responders found evidence of severe trauma. Ashley had suffered a head injury, likely caused by a blunt object. Her condition was dire. Her pupils were dilated and unresponsive to light. She also had bleeding from her mouth and nose, and many bruises. Scratches appeared all over her body, especially on her legs, chest, and back. The medical team attempted emergency resuscitation. They inserted a breathing tube, used a defibrillator, and administered medication to stimulate her heart. Unfortunately, all of these methods failed. Jeffrey was in critical condition and close to death. She was eventually taken to the hospital, and a neurosurgeon was called in to assess her condition. The neurosurgeon's assessment confirmed the medical team's initial diagnosis. Ashley's brain was no longer functioning due to severe damage. Doctors therefore decided to stop treatment to end her pain and disconnected her life support. She passed away shortly after. There was no doubt that Ashley had been brutally murdered. Her right ear was green, a sign often seen in people who were repeatedly hit in the same spot. A man's shoe print on her back suggested that someone had stamped or even jumped on her. Furthermore, her body showed multiple bruises at different stages of healing, indicating that she had suffered repeated abuse. Meanwhile, police were questioning two individuals, Dr. Robert and Jeffrey.
Robert cooperated with the investigation, sharing what information he knew about the incident. He revealed that he had received a call from his friend Jeffrey at 2:30 p.m. He and Jeffrey had been friends since college and kept in touch occasionally. Jeffrey explained to he that Jeffrey and his wife had been drinking the night before, and afterward, she hadn't been feeling well. When she didn't wake up the next day, Jeffrey sought his help, although busy at the time, but he went to their house where he found Jeffrey next to Ashley, who showed no signs of life. Robert suspected that Jeffrey and Ashley had an argument and that something unfortunate had happened, which they wanted to keep quiet. That was why they contacted him. He was aware that they was facing difficulties and each reacted differently. Ashley had turned to alcohol as a means of relieving stress, while Jeffrey became angry and often lost control, hitting Ashley. When Robert examined Ashley, he realized that the situation was much more serious than he had initially thought. Unfortunately, Ashley had little chance of survival and required urgent medical attention immediately. So, he urged Jeffrey to call 911. Meanwhile, Robert analyzed the situation and thought that something much more serious had happened. He suspected that a crime had been planned. When speaking to the police, he admitted that he had deliberately kept Jeffrey at the scene to prevent him from escaping. Jeffrey remained completely emotionless throughout the entire ordeal. He appeared unconcerned about the fate of Ashley, the woman he once loved. When questioned by the police about what had happened, he explained that the previous night had ended in an argument. The reason for the fight was his discovery of the messages exchanged between his wife, Ashley, and another man, which led him to believe she was having an affair. Feeling betrayed, he admitted that he had beaten his wife once. Following the altercation, Ashley stumbled and fell due to her intoxication. According to Jeffrey, she faced severe alcoholism and often acted irrationally. He lost patience with her frequent tantrums. In a fit of anger, he asked her to leave the house. It was not uncommon for Ashley to sleep in the garage on such nights. The next morning, he found her still asleep in the garage and, feeling a pang of sympathy, carried her back into the house and laid her down on their bed. However, as the day went on, Ashley still hadn't woken up. Jeffrey realized something was wrong and attempted to revive her himself. He then called a friend named Robert, who was a doctor, to come to the house. However, the police did not believe his account. When they arrived, Ashley was covered in bruises from head to toe and had severe injuries to her face and head. Even if she had been drunk and fallen, she wouldn't have sustained such extensive injuries. It was evident that she had been assaulted. Jeffrey was arrested and charged with aggravated assault, and once the autopsy results were released, the charge was elevated to first-degree murder. The pathologist's report revealed that Ashley died from a subdural hematoma on the right side of her brain. Such injuries occur from a significant blow to the head, causing the brain to collide with the skull, which leads to severe bleeding and swelling that cuts off the oxygen supply. This process causes parts of the body to weaken, causing extreme pain. Tragically, she could have survived if help had arrived within the first few hours. Additionally, over 50 hematomas of varying colors and densities were found on her body, confirming that she had been repeatedly attacked. It's difficult to fathom the pain she experienced. The saddest thing is that the person who caused this pain was her husband, Jeffrey, the person who was supposed to protect her. After Jeffrey's arrest, detectives examined the crime scene and found signs of a struggle throughout the house. Items were scattered, furniture was turned over, and a broken vase was in the living room. On the kitchen table, near a laptop, are printed text messages between Ashley and her lover. These text messages support Jeffrey's testimony about the cause of the crime. In the garage, officers discovered bloodstains on the floor. Inside her car, they found women's clothing and personal items, including a handbag with her documents and passport. It seemed that she had been planning to escape, but did not succeed. Officers then interviewed family members and friends, uncovering unexpected details about their lives and the circumstances surrounding the incident. Unfortunately, Ashley is having a difficult time in her relationship with her husband, Jeffrey. From the very beginning, they believed that their relationship would turn out well. However, he quickly became abusive, making her life extremely miserable. Lori's testimony became very important to the investigation. Detectives were interested in what Ashley's family and friends had to say. Through their conversations, they gathered a lot of useful information. Lori also shared that just before Ashley's death, Jeffrey had called her multiple times to complain about his wife. He claimed that Ashley drank heavily, lost her balance, and frequently fell, which explained the bruises on her body. However, the next morning, Ashley would not remember these incidents and would blame Jeffrey instead. He believed that Ashley's increasing alcohol dependency was due to their mutual friend Blair, whom he accused of corrupting Ashley and turning her against him. Jeffrey also expressed that he no longer wanted children because he felt disgusted by Ashley after everything that had happened. He accused his wife of being unfaithful, lying, and struggling with alcoholism. However, Lori did not believe him and thought he was trying to excuse his own behavior. Eventually, Lori realized that Ashley was a victim of domestic violence and was in serious danger. After each of Jeffrey's calls, Lori would try to reach Ashley, but she never answered, which was unusual. The last time they met was shortly before the tragic incident. They went shopping together, but Ashley did not buy anything for herself and seemed sad and lost in thought. Lori attempted to discuss Ashley's marriage, but Ashley preferred not to ruin their time together and changed the subject. She just said she was ready for a divorce, but it made her very nervous. She knew Jeffrey very well and worried that she couldn't predict how he would react. The next testimony concerns Blair Brown, who is often mentioned when talking about Ashley's family. During her questioning, she admitted that she had been in a romantic relationship with Jeffrey in the past, which gave her insight into his uncontrollable fits of rage. It was noted that Blair and Ashley had rekindled their friendship about 6 months before the crime occurred. Blair felt sympathy for Ashley and offered her occasional support. She acknowledged that her relationship with Jeffrey was a mistake and apologized repeatedly for it. She and Ashley sometimes meet for drinks. Ashley often goes to her house to hide from Jeffrey. On one occasion, he found Ashley at her place and violently attacked Ashley's, hitting several times in the face and throwing Ashley's onto the street, showing no concern for she as a witness. Even though there have been such incidents, Ashley still justifies Jeffrey's actions. The trial of Jeffrey Scott started on January 13, 2009. The prosecution claimed that the crime was premeditated. Evidence showed that an argument between Jeffrey and his wife Ashley began in the living room, where a broken vase was discovered. The conflict becomes more serious as they move throughout the house, and Ashley endures violence in nearly every room. Bloodstains were found throughout the home. Ashley's divorce attorney testified for the prosecution, stating that she had met with Ashley the day before death. At that time, all the divorce paperwork was ready. Ashley only needed to pack her belongings and leave while Jeffrey was at work. The attorney advised Ashley to leave secretly, which explains the items and documents found in her car. However, Ashley chose not to follow this advice because she wanted to explain her decision to her husband, a choice that ultimately proved fatal. The attorney did everything she could to assist Ashley, even offering her services for a minimal fee. She said that Ashley had been drinking and quitting work to deal with her emotions related to her marriage. This shows that Ashley needs long-term support. To ensure Ashley's safety, they communicated in secret, as Jeffrey controlled all phone calls. They met in public places or used payphones for their conversations. Witnesses reported seeing scratches and bruises on Ashley, which she tried to hide with makeup. Some people knew the source of her injuries, but felt powerless to intervene. In their final report, medical examiners noted that Ashley had been frequently kicked. It appeared that Jeffrey had pushed her to the ground and stomped on her, leaving old bruises on her back and legs. The defense team for Jeffrey worked hard to have the charge reduced to a second-degree crime. The attorney tried to make Ashley look bad, portraying her as an alcoholic and emotionally unstable. Their strategy was to convince the jury that Jeffrey also had a difficult time in the marriage. They discredited she, who couldn't defend herself because she was deceased. It came to light that in 2005, Ashley had received a drunk driving fine. Meanwhile, Jeffrey said he wanted to save their marriage. He bought a new house and was ready to have children, while Ashley had and sent intimate pictures to your lover. Regarding the crime, Jeffrey said that he lost control, realized that all his efforts were in vain, and that Ashley had found someone else. He expressed his regret to his wife's family, saying that he regretted the pain he caused them. He mourned her loss and prayed for her soul. However, during the trial, it was mentioned that after his arrest, he did not inquire about his wife's well-being. Instead, he simply wanted to know the outcome of a recent football game. His attorney have adopted controversial tactics, even arguing that Ashley's injuries were largely caused by seizures brought on by alcohol withdrawal. To support this claim, an independent expert was brought in. In response, the assistant county medical examiner was called to testify. He reviewed evidence from the autopsy, describing Ashley's injuries in detail and stressing that her cause of death could not have been a fall. The prosecutor said that the defense's claim that the crime was committed accidentally was unreasonable. It was evident that Ashley wanted to escape from Jeffrey, her abuser, but out of love for her husband, wished to end things peacefully. Meanwhile, Jeffrey attacked her and hitting her repeatedly. He understood that he was causing great suffering to his wife. He ultimately finished the attack in the garage, where she lost consciousness. He saw how badly she was hurt, but chose to ignore it and failed to call for medical help right away. The prosecutor maintained that he intended to kill his wife. However, a new clue suddenly appears. Investigators discover that Ashley actually wants to save her marriage. Evidence showed she was taking medication to become pregnant and had supported buying a new home. She might have felt so trapped in the toxic relationship that she couldn't envision life without Jeffrey. Nevertheless, she eventually made the choice to leave. It's possible she hoped to leave without causing a rift, waiting for her husband to promise he would change and that everything would be okay. Victims of abuse often hold on to such unrealistic hopes. On January 19, 2009, Jeffrey Scott was found guilty of a second-degree crime. Even the judge disagreed with the jury's verdict. He criticized the jury for having voted 12 yes and 1 no on the original charge. One juror did not believe Jeffrey was guilty. Under state law, a unanimous verdict is necessary for a first-degree conviction. Ashley's family was also devastated. Jeffrey will serve 25 years in prison without the possibility of parole. Many feel this punishment is insufficient for someone who tortured a woman for years, isolating her from others, brainwashing her, and making her believe that she and her family were unworthy of being in his life. Ashley's father remarked that it was the worst thing that had ever happened to him, expressing his love for his daughter and stating that if she had died of natural causes, he could have eventually accepted it. However, he expressed his pain when he realized that his daughter had died a cruel death caused by Jeffrey and that he would never accept it. The case of Nohema Graber. Nohema Graber was born in Mexico. From a young age, she found joy in traveling. Immediately after graduating from high school, she began working as a flight attendant for a local airline. Nohema was one of the first Mexican women to learn to fly passenger planes in the 1970s. At that time, it was not common for women to become pilots, but Nohema was determined to pursue her goal. She paid for her own flying lessons, with the money she earned as a flight attendant. In this way, she paved the way for many other Mexican women in the aviation industry, proving that it was indeed possible. This achievement was groundbreaking for her time. Nohema met her future husband Paul at a party where they both expressed their love for each other. However, circumstances forced them apart. Paul had to return to his hometown in the United States. 11 years later, while traveling through Mexico, he reached out to Nohema and asked to meet. She agreed, and after their date, they realized they couldn't live without each other. They started seeing each other more often and communicated regularly by phone. Their relationship progressed towards marriage, and in 1986, they got married in Nohema's homeland when she was 33 years old. During this time, she worked as a flight attendant, pilot, and business consultant in Mexico City. The couple lived happily ever after. Their first child, Christian, was born in 1991, followed by his younger brother Jareth a year later. However, they found Mexico to be an unsafe place to raise children due to widespread crime and unrest, especially in their high-crime neighborhood. As a result, they decided to move to a safer place for their children. In 1992, the Nohema family moved to the small, friendly town of Fairfield, Iowa, USA. The town was a typical American suburb with a low crime rate and a tight-knit community, home to less than 10,000 residents at the time. It was also Paul's hometown. Nohema was a homemaker, while her husband had a good job to support the family. Soon after, the Nohemas welcomed a daughter. For many years, the Nohema family was respected in the community and was known as friendly, humble, and decent people. Nohema was very active and enjoyed hiking in nature. This lifestyle continued until her children grew up and had their own families. Then, conflicts began to arise between Nohema and Paul, which eventually led to divorce. Despite the divorce, both parents maintained a strong relationship with their children. They also kept in touch with each other, calling and talking regularly, and occasionally having dinner together. Paul was a devoted father, actively involved in his children's education. He spent time with them and supported their education. This support continued even after his children were grown. At that time, Nohema, who was in her 50s and finding single life uninteresting, decided to pursue her childhood dream of becoming a teacher. She earned a degree in English and a teaching certificate from the University of Iowa in nearby Mount Pleasant. In early 2012, Nohema began teaching at Fairfield High School, where she quickly became popular among students and staff. The students showed her a lot of affection, which set her apart from other teachers. She also taught Spanish part-time. On November 2, 2021, Nohema did not return home after work. She lived alone, so no one knew what happened to Nohema. It was not until the next morning that the staff at her school noticed that Nohema had not come to work. Her colleagues tried to contact her by phone and through social media, but they received no response. Worried, they contacted her ex-husband Paul. He was worried because he knew Nohema was a responsible person and would never skip work without informing anyone. Feeling worried, he decided to check on her and drove to her house. No one answered his knock, so Paul began looking through the windows but saw no signs of anything unusual inside. He became concerned that Nohema might have had a medical emergency. He then called the police for assistance. The officers took Paul's statement and went to the house. When they opened the door, the inside was empty and nothing unusual was found. The police quickly questioned those close to Nohema and learned that Nohema was last seen leaving school. She got into her car and drove away. Nohema often went for a walk in the park to enjoy nature after a day's work. The police tracked her phone and confirmed her daily routine. After work that day, she went for a walk in the park. Police requested surveillance camera footage from the park and began an investigation. A family member provided valuable information about Nohema's daily walking route. During the investigation at Chautauqua Park, police discovered Nohema's body. The criminals had attempted to conceal it by covering it with a tarp and placing old iron bars over it. Forensic experts searched the scene for clues that could lead to a suspect, but unfortunately, they found none. The discovery of Nohema's body left locals terrified, worried that a dangerous man was on the loose. To increase security, public patrols were set up in the park. Police carefully examined the crime scene, suspecting that the killer might have returned. Meanwhile, an autopsy was underway. The forensic expert determined that Nohema had died from blunt force trauma to the head, indicating she had been brutally beaten, likely with a bat. It was hard to fathom who could commit such a horrific act against this kind and gentle woman. Those who knew her insisted that she had no enemies or anyone who would wish her harm. A school student suddenly contacted the police with information about two teenagers. The informant revealed that these teenagers were her classmates who had boasted about a murder on social media. The suspects were identified as 16-year-olds Willard Miller and Jeremy Goodale. Even though their social media accounts had been deleted, the police managed to review their profiles, which raised several concerns. Police began interviewing students in Nohema's class, and multiple witnesses reported that on the day of her disappearance, she had argued with Willard. He claimed that she had unfairly given him low grades, which affected his overall grades. Willard initially asked Nohema to raise his grade. However, she believed that with more effort, he could have achieved better results on his own. Therefore, she refused his request. Students said Willard had never shown any signs of violence. He had never shown cruelty in the past, and no one could imagine him capable of committing this crime. He came from a respectable family, but according to some classmates, he had a grudge against his teacher, Nohema. The Willard stated that he had never received bad grades before joining Nohema's class and attributed his drop in academic performance to the teacher's perceived bias. However, other students disagreed, believing the teacher was fair and graded all students appropriately. Following this information, the officers decided to visit the Willard's home for further discussion. When the police arrived at Willard's home, he remained calm and confident throughout the conversation. However, when the conversation turned to the murder, he became angry and spoke disrespectfully about Nohema. Willard initially claimed that the teacher had intentionally given him a low grade and that he had no idea that her body had been discovered. He thought she had just been reported missing and was the subject of a search. However, when the police confronted him and revealed that Nohema had been murdered and her body had been found, all the evidence pointed to his involvement. Under pressure, Willard quickly admitted that he had been present at the attack on Nohema. He claimed that other masked men had attacked Nohema with baseball bats and that he had been forced to watch. They then forced him to load her body onto a cart in the park and take it near the cultural heritage site. Willard denied any role in the crime. At the same time, police were searching for Nohema's car, which was missing from both the school parking lot and the park. When questioned, Willard again spoke of the mysterious masked attackers. He said that after the attack, they forced him to drive Nohema's car and left him in a secluded area. However, Willard could not clarify who the masked individuals were, what their motive was for killing the teacher, or how they arrived at the crime scene. His testimony did not convince the police. Police also arrested Willard's friend, 16-year-old Jeremy. Jeremy gave a similar account and denied any involvement in the murder. During the investigation, they discovered a disturbing notebook belonging to Jeremy. After examining its contents, police determined that in the months leading up to the tragic incident, the two boys had been following Nohema and recording her actions. They recorded details such as what time she left school, how long she stayed in the parking lot, where she went, and other specifics. These notes revealed a significant part of her daily routine. She would go to the park alone after work, taking the same route every day. On November 2, Nohema went to the park as usual and was attacked by Willard and Jeremy. They struck Nohema several times in the head, causing her to fall and become unconscious. Willard and Jeremy then dragged her off the park trail, where they continued to beat Nohema until she died. They then covered Nohema's body with leaves and branches before going to Willard's house to get a garden cart. Along the way, they picked up some wooden planks to help hide the body. They returned to the scene, immobilized the body, and covered it with a tarp in the hopes that it would never be found. Around 4:00 p.m., witnesses saw Nohema's car parked near her home. Several people confirmed seeing two teenagers inside the car. Unfortunately, none of the witnesses were able to positively identify the suspect because they could not clearly see the occupants of the car. The car was only there for a few minutes before driving away. A friend of Jeremy's provided additional information. On the day of Nohema's disappearance, Willard and Jeremy had called their friend around 7:00 p.m. after leaving Nohema's car and asked him to pick them up on Glasgow Road. The young man met Willard and Jeremy there. He noticed that they seemed disheveled and nervous. Neither of them spoke during the entire ride home. The only thing he heard from them was that their car was stuck somewhere. He suspected that they were involved in something serious. He then drove Willard and Jeremy home and said goodbye. After gathering all the information, the police returned to Jeremy's home with a search warrant. The officers found bloody towels, blood-stained clothing, and hair that did not belong to Jeremy. They also recovered 2 bloody baseball bats from the home. Forensic analysis confirmed that the blood belonged to Nohema. More evidence quickly emerged. During interviews, several students admitted to seeing messages from Jeremy on messaging apps. In these messages, he detailed how he and a friend killed their homeroom teacher, Nohema. Jeremy explained that he was motivated by the belief that Nohema had unfairly graded their work. He went on to describe the baseball bat murder, how they transported the body, and the theft of their car, which they then abandoned. The police examined the phones of Jeremy and Willard and discovered that the two communicated with each other about the murder. Their messages included details about the motive, the planning process, the location of the Nohema's body, where her car was parked, and how they disposed of the evidence. It is clear that the murder was premeditated, not a spontaneous act. Willard and Jeremy tracked Nohema's movements, and on November 2, the day she left work and went to the park, Jeremy and Willard were there waiting for her. They had studied her schedule and knew she would be alone. Police found an abandoned car belonging to Nohema along the route they checked. Surveillance footage showed that on November 16, the car arrived at the park, the Nohema got out, and 42 minutes later, Jeremy and Willard approached the car and drove away. They were wearing the same clothes found at their home, which had blood on them. On the same day, Willard and Jeremy were arrested and charged with first-degree murder and conspiracy to commit a felony. There were aggravating factors, including intentional obstruction of justice and destruction of evidence. It is important to note that for this heinous crime, Willard and Jeremy were tried as adults. Although the defense requested that they be treated as juveniles, this request was denied. If convicted as adults, they would face life in prison with the possibility of parole due to their age. Initially, Willard and Jeremy wanted to be tried together, but Jeremy's attorney argued that Jeremy was not the instigator of the crime. He was named as an accomplice. Therefore, a separate trial was requested for him. Jeremy's attorney claimed that Willard was the mastermind behind the murder of Nohema. This led to a lengthy legal battle in which Willard and Jeremy attempted to blame each other for the crime. Therefore, it was decided to hold separate trials for the teenagers. The attorneys were successful in moving the trial to a different city to avoid potential bias. Jeremy's defense attorney claimed that he was an innocent young man who was negatively influenced by Willard. However, this argument has been dismissed when it was revealed that Jeremy had bragged about the murder in a text message the day after it occurred, describing his actions and showing no remorse. Jeremy was clearly an active participant in the crime. The lawyer argued that Jeremy was questioned without any adults present, which led him to give up his Miranda rights. These rights inform suspects of their right to remain silent and to have an attorney present during questioning. However, there was no evidence of coercion. Jeremy appeared relaxed during the interrogation and was even offered donuts and coffee. The pressure and intimidation that the lawyer mentioned did not happen during his time with the police. The trial for Jeremy was set for December 5, 2021, while Willard's trial was scheduled for August 21, 2022. On November 2, a hearing took place to confirm the trial's schedule, and Jeremy successfully postponed his trial. The defense team was busy preparing the case materials, and the Supreme Court was also involved. Willard's defense team requested a thorough investigation into the actions of police agencies. This investigation included reviewing police procedures and looking for any violations or inconsistencies. The defense claimed that the police had lied to obtain a search warrant. If they proved this, the lawyers could eliminate certain key pieces of evidence from the trial, preventing them from being presented to the jury during the upcoming hearings. The defense actually managed to block some of the data that the police found on the phone and computer. Attorneys tried to exclude any social media conversations and text messages that contained confessions about the murders. They claimed that Willard and Jeremy may have made up these stories or claimed responsibility for the crimes to gain attention from their peers. However, the defense's efforts were unsuccessful. During the trial, Willard's mother came to court to defend her son. She explained that when police approached her son on November 4, 2021, at approximately 5:30 p.m., they did not inform her of his possible involvement in the murder. She thought he was being questioned like any other student in Nohema's class, simply as a witness. Had she known that the police considered Willard a suspect, she would have made sure he had legal representation. She said the police visit took her by surprise. When she took Willard to the police station, she was in a hurry and accidentally took the wrong glasses. As a result, when she was asked to sign some papers there, she could not read what was on them. She told the police about her situation and refused to sign. The police assured her that it was just a formality to request permission to interrogate her son, so she signed without thinking. Now, she complained that she felt cheated. After all that had happened, she was not allowed to see her son because he had been arrested on suspicion of murdering Nohema. This situation made her extremely angry with the police's actions. Willard's mother contacted a friend who was a police officer and learned that her son, as a minor, should not be questioned without a lawyer. This information led her to suspect that both she and Willard were being tricked into expediting the case. She believed that Willard's statements were false confessions, coerced by the officers who had left him alone. This violated proper investigative procedures. The mother returned to the police station at approximately 7:30 a.m. and asked the senior inspector to stop speaking to her son, exercising Willard's legal right to do so. The police agreed to her request. However, official reports indicate that the questioning lasted a long time and did not end until 9:30 a.m. The prosecutor's office maintained that they did nothing wrong, explaining that state law allows for the questioning of minors if there is suspicion of their involvement in a crime, especially in serious cases. The police involved in the investigation denied the mother's allegations, claiming that they had clearly communicated the purpose of their visit and search, and that Willard had voluntarily consented to being questioned. However, The mother maintained that she would never have allowed Willard to be questioned without her presence and without an attorney. The prosecution said they had substantial and near-certainty evidence of Willard and Jeremy's guilt, which is why they proceeded confidently and transparently. Their actions were in compliance with state law. In Iowa, police can question minors without their parents present because the parents are likely suspects in the crime. However, if the parents are present, they have the right to request that the questioning stop or have an attorney present. The jury considered statements from Willard's parents and scheduled the trial for March 20, 2023. The defense then attempted to delay the trial again. The attorney argued that his schedule was too tight and asked that the case be postponed until later in the year. This delay was seen as disrespectful to the families of the Nohema who were seeking justice. It is unacceptable to them to assume that lawyers are too busy to adjourn the trial. Therefore, this excuse was not considered and the trial proceeded without further delay. The judge therefore set Willard's trial date for March 20, 2023. Jeremy is scheduled to appear in court on May 15, 2023. During this time, Nohema's social media page became a memorial page, with many students writing letters in honor of Nohema. The trial found that Willard was the one who delivered the first blow, which was not fatal. However, he then struck Nohema in the head several times. Realizing the severity of his actions, Willard apologized to Nohema's family and confessed to the crime. He was ultimately convicted of first-degree murder and attempted murder. In July 2023, Willard Miller was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole. Jeremy Goodale was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 25 years. This tragedy resulted in the death not only of Nohema, but also of her ex-husband. Paul had been battling cancer, but after hearing the news of Nohema's death, he fell into a deep depression and stopped seeking treatment. Without medication, Paul could not control his disease and soon passed away. Hello, everyone. Today we will learn about another case. The case of millionaire Ben Novak Jr. In 2009, in New York, Ben Novak Jr. was found dead in a hotel room during a business trip. His hands and feet were bound with duct tape, and a gag was stuffed in his mouth. The 53-year-old died from choking on his own blood after an attack in his eye. Get ready. This story has many important details. First, let's learn about the Novak family. Ben Novak Jr. owned the renowned Fontainebleau Hotel, a 5-star establishment on the Miami coastline. Born in America in 1907, his father Hyman was a Russian immigrant with the original surname Novak. Hyman initially made clothes and later opened his own store, but it struggled financially. He then became a manager at a New York hotel, where he hired his son, Ben, who had a keen interest in the hotel industry. Ben's career flourished, and by age 40, he had become a successful hotelier with a solid income. He moved to Miami and changed the family name from Novak to Novak. Ben was married 3 times. His first wife, Elsie, was with him for about 15 years. They faced challenges in having children, and when they were both over 40, they adopted a boy named Ronald. Unfortunately, after just 2 years, they divorced. Elsie retained ownership of a prestigious hotel that was registered in her name during their marriage. After the divorce, Ben showed no interest in raising Ronald and did not participate in his life at all. Shortly after the divorce, when 45-year-old Ben Novak started a relationship with 30-year-old model Bernice a year later, in 1952, they formalized their relationship in December 1954. At the age of 47, Ben opened the famous Fontainebleau Hotel in Miami. which featured 500 rooms, 12 restaurants, a nightclub, and a luxurious swimming pool. The hotel became a popular vacation spot for current and former U.S. presidents. High-ranking officials and celebrities also performed there. Many films were filmed at this hotel. In 1956, the Novak family welcomed their long-awaited heir, a boy named Ben Novak Jr., who was affectionately called Benji. He grew up on the hotel grounds with his parents and was often surrounded by adults, including celebrities. Hotel security guards primarily took care of him. And from a young age, Benji dreamed of becoming a police officer. Benji was a spoiled child, often making cruel remarks. As he received everything he asked for from the nannies, his parents were usually busy with work. His father was always occupied with business, while his mother frequently worked at the hotel but tried to spend her free time with him. Ben Novak's second marriage ended in divorce, but he maintained a good relationship with his second wife. After they divorced, Benji continued to live with his father at the hotel. Ben Novak Jr. later remarried, but his third marriage was short-lived and also ended in divorce. Despite this, he continued to spend time with Bernice, and they remained close for the rest of their lives. In 1978, 24 years after the legendary hotel opened, Ben Novak declared bankruptcy due to the business's financial losses. However, he still had millions remaining in his accounts 7 years later. In 1985, he passed away from cardiopulmonary failure at the age of 78. In his will, he left his entire inheritance to Bernice and his only biological son, Ben Novak Jr. It is important to note that he left only $1 to his adopted son, Ronald, whom he had adopted with his first wife at the time of his father's death. Benji was 29 years old. He had previously worked in the police force but became disillusioned with that childhood dream and decided to start his own business. Those close to him noted that Benji transformed from a spoiled child into a bold and ambitious man, often displaying aggression when things didn't go his way. Much like his father, he explored various business ventures, experiencing both successes and failures. Ultimately, he established a company that organized conferences and conventions for other businesses, with Amway being his largest client for many years. In 1991, Benji lived in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, at 35. He had been in several relationships until meeting Narcy. Him realized he was truly in love. Narcy, who was from a large family in Cuba. She moved to the U.S. and worked as a dancer in a nightclub. Where she first met Benji, she already had a daughter, May Abad, from an old marriage, who was then raised by Bernice. Although Bernice wasn't fond of Narcy, she chose not to interfere. Wishing to avoid conflict with her son, Benji and Narcy married in 1991 and started living together. Narcy left her job as a stripper to help Benji with his business and to write books together. After their wedding, they enjoyed a lavish lifestyle, affording expensive clothes, dining out, and luxury cars. Additionally, Benji was an avid collector of Batman memorabilia, owning the second largest collection in the world, which included a 1,977 Batmobile. Among other items, he was meticulous about his purchases, always negotiating to get the best prices. In total, his collection was valued at around $2 million. It is worth noting that in Amore business, Benji saved on everything. He organized conventions for large companies and made a point to cut costs wherever possible. This careful management allowed him to preserve his father's assets, which still contained a significant amount of money, around $10 million that he inherited. Benji frequently traveled for work, as he valued his freedom and did not like being tied down at home. Although he had no health issues, neither he nor Narcy wanted children. When Narcy's daughter grew up, she had 2 sons and began assisting her mother and stepfather with their business. May affectionately called Benji Dad and had a good relationship with him, receiving financial support from him as well. On July 10, 2009, Benji, Narcy, and May traveled from Florida to New York to organize a conference for the Amway Company, which would welcome thousands of participants from various cities. They stayed at the Hilton Hotel in Westchester County, Benji and Narcy in room 455, while May had her own room nearby. 2 days later, around 7 a.m., Narcy left their room to have breakfast in the cafe on the first floor. After a short time, about 40 minutes, she returned to their room. When she found her husband lying face down on the floor, there was a significant amount of blood around him. Benji was bound, and a gag was in his mouth, indicating he had been attacked. Panicked, Narcy called 911. Then she rushed down the corridor, crying out to another hotel guest that her husband had been killed. When the police and medical personnel arrived, they confirmed that Benji was dead. Initially, investigators believed he might have been the target of a robbery. After thoroughly inspecting the room, it was found that nearly all valuables were intact. Benji regularly carried large amounts of cash to conferences, and that money was untouched. The only item missing was a gold bracelet adorned with diamonds and engraved with his name. Investigative agency was revealed that a hotel employee called the Novak family's room at 6:54 a.m. At this time, Benji answered the phone and spoke with the employee about the upcoming conference. This shows he was still alive when Narcy left the room. Security camera footage showed Narcy moving around the hotel and supported her claim that she was having breakfast when her husband was attacked. Although Narcy was taken to the police station for questioning, she completely denied any wrongdoing and claimed she had no knowledge of what happened to Benji. She emphasized to investigators that Benji was a strict and tough person who often upset those around him. She explained that on the night in question, he had worked late into the night and went to bed only after sunrise. So she had breakfast on her own at 7:15 a.m. She went downstairs to the cafe, where she spoke with a hotel employee. The employee mentioned that they did not expect many attendees at the conference. As a result, many participants are forced to buy plastic plate because they fit the budget. After this conversation, Narcy tried to call Benji on his mobile phone to share this disappointing news, but he did not answer, thinking he was simply asleep. So Narcy did not feel concerned. Narcy went to the conference room to assess the situation. Afterward, she returned to her own room and sensed something was off, but Narcy chose to take a shower. Once she entered the bedroom, she discovered Benji dead and urgently called 911. The police and ambulance arrived at 7:57 a.m. Upon investigating, the police found no forced entry. The hotel room doors were secure. The keycard data revealed that Narcy had opened the door at midnight and again at 7:04 a.m. She could not remember exactly whether she closed the door behind her when she left in the morning or if she forgot to do it. Allowing someone to get inside without a key card during a lengthy 12-hour interrogation, Narcy acknowledged that she and Benji often engaged in bondage during sex and that he enjoyed it. This raised questions about why Benji was found in an unusual position. Narcy explained that on that morning, she had tied him up during their sexual activities and left, intending for him to wait and become more aroused. She also recounted an incident in which Benji had broken her nose and then sent her to a plastic surgeon to fix it. When she woke up from the surgery, she discovered that silicone breast implants had also been inserted without her consent. When asked if she had any role in her husband's death, Narcy firmly replied, "No." She added, "If you suspect me, then bring the electric chair. I'm ready to sit on it right now. I don't want to suffer. Let me do it right now." Investigators interviewing Narcy noted that her emotional responses appeared to lack sincerity. The following day, July 13, she failed a lie detector test but was released due to insufficient evidence shortly after. The autopsy results for Benji were revealed. It was confirmed that he had been attacked while sleeping. He sustained a blow to the head from a blunt object, was bound, and gagged. The attacker also his eyes, and Benji ultimately died from choking on his own blood next to Benji's body. Police discovered a pair of cheap, fake glasses resembling a well-known brand. Narcy claimed the glasses were hers. They had broken, and she had given them to Benji for repair. Detectives found it odd that a wealthy woman would own such inexpensive fakes. Those close to Benji described Narcy as very jealous. On one occasion, Narcy caught her husband with another woman, leading her to erupt in jealousy and threatened to burn their house down. However, following Benji's death, she denied these claims, asserting that such incidents had never occurred. Detectives investigated Benji's banking transactions and discovered that he had been paying for an apartment in Florida for the past 2 years. Rebecca Bliss lived in this apartment. She had moved to America from Lebanon and previously worked in adult films. But after meeting Benji in 2007, she stopped doing dirty filming. Rebecca was Benji's mistress, and he covered all her expenses. He managed to keep this secret relationship hidden for a long time. However, just a few months before Benji's death, Narcy learned about the affair. She confronted Rebecca and offered make to her $10 to end the relationship with Benji and stay away from him. But Rebecca declined the offer. No one was certain if Benji intended to leave his wife, but it was clear that, if they divorced, Narcy would receive only $65 and relocation expenses according to their marriage contract. But now, Benji's multi-million-dollar fortune would ultimately be transferred to her. Investigative agency was revealed that 7 years earlier, in 2002, Benji had already been the victim of a home invasion. 2 unknown men broke into his home, tied him up, and held him hostage for an entire day without food or water. They stole valuables and cash totaling $400. Benji later told his friends that he believed Narcy orchestrated the attack instead of going to the police. He filed for divorce. Following this, Narcy began to spread harmful rumors about Benji's sexual preferences. In response, he retracted his divorce filing and continued to live with Narcy, insisting that he loved her deeply. During the investigation, detectives discovered that Bernice had sadly passed away just 3 months earlier, on April 4, 2009. At that time, she, 87-year-old, lived alone in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, as reported. After parking her car in the driveway, she got out and immediately tripped and fell, injuring her face and head. Once inside her home, she went to the bathroom to clean herself up, but fell several more times. She lay on the floor for 2 days without being able to call for help. Her body was found a week later. An autopsy revealed that Bernice had a broken jaw and teeth, along with skull injuries. Given her age and the circumstances, investigators concluded that her death was accidental. Relatives remembered Bernice as an active elderly woman who took care of herself. She called Benji every day and had a good relationship with May. Benji was deeply saddened by his mother's death and threw himself into work to distract himself from his grief. However, as time went on, he began to suspect that his mother's death was not an accident. After Benji's death, Narcy returned to her home in Florida, where May accused her of being responsible for her stepfather's death. This led to a major argument between Narcy and May, during which Narcy struck her daughter with a metal crowbar. Neighbors intervened to separate them and urged them to calm down. 10 days after, the police received an anonymous letter written in Spanish. The letter claimed that Narcy was involved in Benji's death and suggested investigating her brother, 57-year-old Cristobal Velas, who lived in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and worked as a bus driver. The police located Cristobal and questioned him, but he denied any involvement in Benji's death. Detectives gathered information about Cristobal and were immediately interested in the money transfers that he had made in the last month. Cristobal had sent money to a man named Alejandro Garcia, who had a criminal history and a noticeable physical characteristic. He had only one healthy eye. The other was damaged. He almost always wore glasses to hide the defect. The detectives started to suspect that Cristobal had paid Alejandro for the murder of Benji. The crime occurred at the Hilton Hotel, where there were numerous CCTV cameras. The detectives soon found video footage of Alejandro at the hotel. Accompanied by another man named Joel Gonzalez, the police began to monitor the locations and bank transactions of both men, and discovered that Alejandro and Joel had been living in South Florida for several months after Benji's death. Investigators were exploring the possibility that Narcy had Benji murdered because she feared he would leave her for his mistress, leaving her with nothing. After her husband's death, Narcy, still in New York, received $100 from his company as the main suspect in the case. She was not entitled to inherit his assets upon returning to Florida. Narcy began selling Benji's and Bernice's property. Keeping all the profits for herself, she sold many valuables, including part of a Batman toy collection. In August 2009, Narcy appeared at the bank with the keys to 3 safes in which Benji's valuables and papers were kept. She deceived the bank employees by saying that her husband would arrive in a few hours and give his consent, even though, at that time, 7 weeks had passed since Benji's death. Nobody knew what was inside before. Narcy emptied the safes and left. Benji's body remained in the morgue for an extended period while the investigation continued. It was only 2 months after his death that he was finally buried in Queens County, New York, next to his father's grave. In November 2009, police summoned Alejandro and Joel for questioning. Initially, both men denied their involvement, but then they confessed. The investigators explained that Cristobal had found them and brought them to New York. At that time, Narcy was dining with Benji at the Hilton Hotel restaurant. While Alejandro and Joel sat at a nearby table, Narcy stroked Benji's hair and subtly signaled to the mercenaries who their target was. On the morning of July 12, while Benji was still asleep, Narcy invited Alejandro and Joel into their room. They assaulted the sleeping Benji with a baton, while Narcy directed their actions at her request. They even gouged out Benji's eyes. Cristobal then paid Alejandro thousands of dollars because carrying out the attack on the Novak family. Investigators found material evidence, including cheap glasses belonging to one of the mercenaries, which confirmed that Alejandro and Joel had been at the scene. In July 2010, a year after the crime, Narcy and Cristobal were arrested at the same time. The prosecutor's office reopened the investigation into the death of Bernice. This new investigation uncovered evidence that Bernice had also been murdered. A neighbor reported seeing 2 men in black clothing approaching Bernice's house and hiding behind the garage during a plea bargain. Alejandro confessed that he and Joel were responsible for attacking Bernice at Narcy's request. They used a gas wrench to beat Bernice, which led to her death. In April 2011, Narcy and Cristobal were charged with Bernice's murder as well. The primary motive for these contract killings was a multi-million-dollar inheritance. Narcy and Cristobal went on trial in 2012, where they both denied any involvement in the deaths of Benji and Bernice. During the trial, the investigation agency was revealed that Narcy had a secret phone at 6:39 a.m. on July 12, 2009. She used this phone to call Alejandro and Joel, inviting them to her room. They arrived at the correct floor and entered the room, which was not monitored by cameras after the murder took place. Narcy left the room casually, as if nothing had happened, and went to the first floor to establish an alibi. She had a meal at a cafe, conversed with a hotel employee, and then proceeded to a conference room. In court, when asked who, in her opinion, could have ordered the murder of Bernice and Benji, Narcy pointed her finger at her own daughter, May. Cristobal agreed with Narcy, stating that the idea belonged to May. The court also heard that after the arrest of Alejandro and Joel, a photograph of May was found in their pocket. May was to become the third victim. After the authorities discovered that May's life was in danger, she was asked to move to New York. It turned out that while still at large, Narcy hired a detective to collect dirt on May. The The detective followed her and her sons, rummaged through their trash can, and collected personal belongings while living in New York. May quickly ran out of money. A local officer lent her $5,000 soon. May returned the money, but the officer lost his job because he was accused of paying May to give false testimony in court. Ultimately, Narcy and Cristobal were found guilty of conspiracy to commit murder, domestic violence, stalking, money laundering, and witness tampering. They were sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Narcy is ineligible to claim her late husband's estate. Alejandro and Joel were also found guilty of contract killings of 2 people. They were sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole 30 years later. Other participants in this high-profile case were also found. Dennis Ramirez, the son-in-law of Cristobal, pleaded guilty to the fact that on July 12, he drove Alejandro and Joel to the Hilton Hotel after the crime. Dennis admitted their involvement in the crime and received a less severe punishment. One of the key pieces of evidence that helped bring the case to a close was an anonymous letter in Spanish that was submitted to police 10 days after the murder, written by both Narcy's sister and Cristobal, who lived in Florida. She confirmed that it was at Narcy's request that Bernice was killed. Then Benji, and the next victim was supposed to be May, while Benji was still alive. He left his will inheritance to Narcy, and in her will, she persuaded to Benji include May there. After Narcy's conviction, May became the sole heir to her stepfather's multi-million-dollar fortune. But the story does not end there. Whenever it comes to a large inheritance, everything is decided quite a long time and is calculated in decades. The fortune of May was really large. 2 houses in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, where Benji and Bernice lived, 9 expensive cars, and also the Batmobile, a white yacht, Lightning, and a bunk barge, large bank accounts, with life insurance payouts for Benji and Bernice. Over the years of litigation, there have been people claiming to be Benji's, and they have tried to claim the inheritance. Benji's first adopted son, Ronald, who hit rock bottom in the 2000s and even lived in the woods, suffered from mental disorders. His mother, Elsie, died in 2001, leaving her adopted son a fairly large inheritance. However, Ronald was nowhere to be found. They couldn't find him and reported him missing in 2008, just 2 days before he was declared dead. Ronald suddenly showed up and took over his adoptive mother Elsie's inheritance due to mental health issues. Ronald's money was put into a trust. Ronald was paid $400 a week and also had all his medical care paid for a year after Benji died. Ronald started fighting over his inheritance. He had enough money to hire a good lawyer and tried to sue for the property of Benji. Ronald tried to prove that May was included in Novak's will under pressure from Narcy. He attempted to deprive May of the right to inherit her stepfather, but he failed. For a decade, May Abad fought for her stepfather's money once. She needed a fairly large sum of money for her son's operation. The boy had heart problems. Then May received $50,000 from Novak's assets. Eventually, May, together with her sons, became the full heirs of the Novak family fortune. However, over the years of litigation, the total amount of the inheritance has significantly decreased. The case of Ben Novak Jr. not only exposes the greed and cold calculation of a wealthy family, but also highlights the human nature when caught up in the whirlwind of money and power. Through the involvement of Narcy, her brother, Cristobal, the case proves that the most brutal acts sometimes come from those closest. The consequences include not only life sentences for the conspirators, but also the complete collapse of a family empire that was once seen as a symbol of success. The case leaves a profound reminder of the dangers of greed, betrayal, and bad choices, and becomes one of the most haunting crime stories in American history. Welcome back to our channel. Today, we will discuss a deeply tragic case that is sure to leave a lasting impression: the case of Lynette Bush. The case rate of women's murder in South Africa is 5 times higher than the global average. according to Statistics South Africa 2018. In recent years, increasing academic attention has focused on media reports that such cases are predominantly violent in nature in terms of physical abuse. Let's focus on Lynette Bush, a 32-year-old woman from a small town in South Africa. After completing her education, she moved to the capital city. Lynette had a passion for nature, often enjoying walks and visits to local parks. She was a kind and friendly person who loved to draw. She had a small circle of friends. They recognized her as a talented, educated, and open individual. For the 5 years leading up to the tragedy, Lynette lived in a 10th-floor apartment in a residential complex in the Belleville suburb of Cape Town. Suddenly, on August 21, 2019, she failed to show up for work at an engineering firm, which raised immediate concern among her management and colleagues. They attempted to contact her through phone calls and social media, but Lynette did not respond to any of their efforts. This was unusual behavior for her, as she had been a dedicated employee for a long time after that event. Her colleagues noted that Lynette had recently been less active on social media and instant messengers, making her silence even more suspicious, despite some concerns. No one checked on Lynette, assuming she was dealing with an urgent matter or was unwell. Everyone was just waiting for updates from her. However, Lynette will never return to work. On August 22, her younger sister, Crystal, attempted to call Lynette for the second consecutive day, but received no answer. Worried, Crystal went to Lynette's apartment building to investigate. As she approached the front door, she heard strange noises and rustling coming from inside, thinking Lynette might be home. Crystal rang the doorbell. A man she didn't recognize answered the door. He wearing rubber gloves and surrounded by a strong smell of cleaning products. Confused, Crystal asked about the stranger's presence. He didn't introduce himself, but calmly explained that Lynette had hired him to do some cleaning, and he had already been paid. He claimed he needed to leave, but would come back later. Crystal found this explanation suspicious, especially because of the dark stains on the man's jumpsuit and the overall condition of the apartment. As Crystal quickly looked around the room, she spotted suspicious brown marks on the walls and floor that looked like dried blood, similar to the stains on the stranger's suit. The man tried to mislead her by claiming that Lynette had been arrested for banned substance possession, which was hard to believe since Lynette had never used them. When the man attempted to leave, Crystal was determined to stop him. She stood in the doorway, making noise and calling for the police. Neighbors drawn by her shouts, they went out and were also shocked at what was about to happen. When the police arrived, they immediately entered the apartment. The marks on the walls and floor were indeed bloody. Much of the kitchen and hallway had been cleaned, and a strong smell of cleaning products filled the air. Large patches of dried body fluids were visible on the floors in every room, suggesting a crime had occurred. This suspicion was confirmed when the detectives checked the bathroom and found body parts. With some already packed into large garbage bags, the man cleaned the apartment was identified as Kyle Reuters, a neighbor from the floor below. He was quickly detained, and the clothes he wore while cleaning were taken as evidence. Kyle was handcuffed and taken to jail. The detectives thought they had found the killer in the act, but they still needed to confirm his connection to the crime and gather more evidence against him. The police spoke with Crystal, who confirmed that she had not been able to reach Lynette since August 21. She mentioned that she had gone to check on her sister, but instead was greeted by a stranger who opened the door for her. Kyle was born in Johannesburg, but his biological parents abandoned him shortly after birth. They struggled with banned substance addiction and did not care for their child's well-being. When it became clear that living with them was unsafe for the infant, he was placed in the care of his grandmother. However, she was unable to fully take care of him, so he was then entrusted to his aunt, Teresa. She raised him as her own son and moved him to Cape Town, where they lived on the 9th floor of a residential complex that Lynette would later also move into. Kyle lived with his aunt for over 10 years. Teresa had a successful career in the Bar Association, specializing in criminal law and worked hard to provide for and raise her nephew. Kyle attended Weinberg High School for Boys, a well-known and prestigious school, recognized as one of the best in the area during his time there. He faced bullying from his classmates, which only stopped when he began playing sports and learned to defend himself. Kyle had a hard time finding a girlfriend and faced challenges in his relationships, but his struggles were not due to his looks. He participated in sports and was a member of the hockey team, and he was actually quite attractive. However, girls tended to avoid him because of his unusual personality. In high school, he struggled academically, but his success in sports helped him gain admission to university in 2016. When he was 21, his friends described him as cheerful and goal-oriented, always working hard to achieve his objectives. From November 1, 2018 to the end of June 2019, Kyle worked at a Christian bookstore in a shopping center. His colleagues found him to be friendly and sociable, always willing to help others, and knowledgeable about his work. The police quickly pieced together the events that led to a tragedy. As they questioned possible witnesses, they learned that around 5 p.m. on August 20, a loud scream came from Lynette's apartment, which sounded like someone was calling for help. Unfortunately, no one responded to the cry. Neighbors noticed that a few weeks before discovered the body. Kyle began to act strangely. He was frequently seen lingering on the landing, where he could watch his neighbor's front door for extended periods. He avoided interactions with other residents of the apartment complex, and when asked what he was doing, he gave vague answers and quickly left. At that time, no one suspected his malicious intentions, but it became apparent that he had been stalking a potential victim. Investigations showed that Kyle was closely monitoring Lynette, studying her work schedule and daily routine, and taking note of when she woke up, went to bed, and visited the store. On August 20, Kyle decided to carry out his violent plan. He waited for Lynette to return home from the grocery store around 5 p.m. She was busy with heavy bags and didn't immediately lock her door after entering. Knowing this, Kyle seized the opportunity and entered her apartment without her noticing. Once Lynette reached the kitchen and placed her groceries on the table, she turned around to find an intruder standing behind her. Kyle then suddenly attacked her. Lynette wrestled to fight back. Surprising Kyle with her strength, however, he grabbed one of her kitchen knives and began to attack her. Realizing her life was in danger, Lynette continued to resist and cried out for help. Unfortunately, after a while, Kyle delivered several fatal blows. Silencing her cries, the neighbors paid little attention to her screams. Other residents of the building confirmed that, alongside her scream, they also heard odd thuds coming from her apartment that day. These sounds were akin to dull blows from a hammer, but in reality, they were the noises of him moving and dismembering her body. Kyle dragged Lynette into the bathroom and began cutting her. Neighbors heard these sounds, but ignored them. Believing they were just home repairs, forensic experts later found numerous defensive wounds on her hands. He inflicted multiple stab wounds to her neck, causing her to lose consciousness and eventually bleed to death. Kyle's plan was not finished. He knew he had to dispose of the body and conceal the crime. The killer decided the best method was to dispose of the parts in various locations around the city. Evidence supporting this plan was discovered in Lynette's apartment, in the bathroom. Investigators found many black bags and a handsaw. They also located a knife that was confirmed to be the murder weapon. Teresa was away from home during this time, so Kyle had planned the event. This allowed him to calmly handle the body on the day of the murder. He separated the victim's head, arms, and legs, and cut the torso into smaller pieces to make it easier to transport from the apartment complex. In total, he used 9 bags for the remains. He stored some of the remains in a refrigerator found in Lynette's room and moved other parts to his apartment on the 9th floor over several trips. After this exhausting task, he went to bed around 10 p.m. that same night. In the morning, Kyle visited the nearest hardware store. There, he purchased gloves, cleaning supplies, and a jumpsuit. Afterward, returned to the apartment of Lynette. His first action was to dispose of Lynette's head. He placed the head in a small backpack and left the apartment to take a short walk in the nearby park. Discarded this backpack into the bushes, however. Kyle was captured on numerous surveillance cameras, making him easy to track. The backpack was found only about 400 meters away from the apartment. To clean up, Kyle used towels to wipe the body fluids and threw them into a trash can at the apartment complex, where they were quickly discovered. During this time, neighbors noticed him carrying a cooler bag while he was outside. The killer returned by a different route, apparently to confuse the tracks, but his movements were too obvious. The worst mistake he made was opening the door to Crystal. It's hard to understand why he chose to confront her while wearing a body fluid-stained cleaning suit, especially given that her sister was missing when the police arrived at the scene. They were already familiar with this apartment building just 2 months before the murder. A 65-year-old man named Anthony Mary was found dead there. During the investigation, detectives discovered that the attacker had entered through a back exit meant for fire evacuations. Anthony had been tied to a chair, but no suspects were identified in that case. Suspicion began to grow that Anthony's death was part of a series of violent events, including Lynette's murder. This news deeply shocked the residents of the apartment building, especially Aunt Teresa. She initially couldn't believe her nephew could be involved in such acts. However, after examining the case details, she came to the troubling realization that Kyle was indeed the perpetrator. Teresa became increasingly worried about the media attention. Journalists frequented her home, seeking information about the incident. Despite their persistence, she declined to comment and even threatened to sue several television stations that had taken her photograph. She regarded this behavior as a threat, requested restrictions on the use of her photo and images of Kyle. However, this was not achieved, as the police were required to notify local residents about these crimes, including by providing photographs when Kyle arrived at the trial. The crowd attacked with insults and threats. Despite this, he remained calm, showing no emotions on his face. During the hearing, the investigators was confirmed that he had no prior convictions or legal issues. The judge permitted photographs to be taken of him, as he was clearly implicated in the murder. After this, the trial was postponed due to the fact that not all the examinations were ready, because Lynette's family struggled with the bitterness of loss and could not attend the trial for some time. Meanwhile, the authorities, following the lawyer's instructions, seriously considered allowing bail so Kyle could be placed under house arrest until the trial began. This sparked significant outrage, as the crime was seen as an extreme act of cruelty. Driven by a desire to kill and unprovoked aggression, Kyle clearly posed a danger to society. On September 7, a funeral was held to honor Lynette. Many friends, family members, and colleagues who had close relationships with her attended the ceremony. At this time, investigators were busy gathering evidence, including a significant amount of DNA found at the crime scene. However, the onset of the 2020 pandemic caused extensive delays and complications within the judicial system. During this time, Kyle's legal representation changed, and he was subjected to a psychiatric evaluation. Psychiatrists who interacted with him determined that, despite some mental health issues, he was fully capable of standing trial. They noted his manipulative behavior, frequent lies, and inconsistent statements. Overall, he is regarded as a highly dangerous individual. Despite this assessment, Kyle's new defense attorney requested a second psychiatric evaluation, arguing that the initial examination was flawed and claiming that Kyle was insane and required treatment rather than imprisonment. Kyle was supposed to be placed in a hospital, but due to issues with lockdowns and a high number of patients, the process was delayed for 12 months. Once the lockdown was lifted, things progressed more quickly. However, the examination didn't begin until 3 months later. Kyle was provided with a ward, and a 30-day observation began. Unfortunately, this observation extended to 2 months. It wasn't until February 2021 that Kyle was deemed sane and ready to face a jury, although 2 psychiatric reports had confirmed his sanity. The defense lawyer requested an examination by an independent expert. The defense aimed to highlight Kyle's psychological issues that contributed to his crime. The court approved this request, causing further delays while waiting for the hearing. Kyle was moved to another prison, where he was also found to be sane. The prosecution's witness list included nearly 60 people, primarily neighbors who observed Kyle following the victim. The investigators was confirmed that he not only murdered a defenseless woman, but also faced charges for desecrating her body by dismembering it. Meanwhile, there was no evidence to support claims of abuse. During a search of Kyle's room, authorities found about 10 South African rand, which he had attempted to use to cover up the massacre. He also misused Lynette's personal belongings, which constituted theft. The trial commenced on May 9, 2023. Initially, Kyle persistently denied his guilt, despite the overwhelming evidence against him. The prosecution offered a plea deal. They proposed that he plead guilty to first-degree murder, desecration of a body, and attempts to obstruct justice. In return, he would be exempt from charges related to theft and the creation and possession of counterfeit money. Final. Kyle accepted the deal in the plea agreement. Kyle described in detail the massacre of Lynette's murder. According to him, he did not know Lynette and had only crossed paths with her a few times, but this was enough for him to target her and choose her as his first victim. He could not explain why he was guided at that moment. He simply had a thirst for violence and found a convenient victim living nearby. Kyle had been planning this attack for a long time. Therefore, he watched Lynette, tracked her down, and analyzed her behavior. Kyle wanted to act as effectively as possible, so he familiarized himself in detail with a number of cases in which killers had successfully hidden from the police for a long time. He tried to understand and take into account their experiences to avoid mistakes in disposing of bodies. However, it did not help him. He didn't even take into account how many cameras recorded almost every action of his. Then Kyle claimed that the murder was not an act of cruelty, according to him. In 2019, he experienced serious difficulties with substance addiction. He owed his dealer a large sum of money, about 30 South African rand. So he was looking for a way to solve his financial problems. Specifically, he printed counterfeit banknotes, but realized that he would have even more problems when the deception was revealed. So, Kyle decided to kill someone and sell her expensive property to cover his debt. The prosecution insisted that it was a carefully planned, cold-blooded murder. Nevertheless, the defendant maintained that his main goal was the keys to the car Lynette owned, which he was going to sell. He regretted what happened, calling it a misunderstanding, referring to the fact that the robbery did not go according to plan. Based on these facts, the court decided that Kyle could be considered a particularly dangerous criminal. The reason is that for Kyle to be recognized as a particularly dangerous criminal, he must undergo a second psychiatric examination. With 30 days of monitoring, there were rumors that during his imprisonment awaiting trial, Kyle became a member of one of the dangerous prison gangs called 28, and he even had a corresponding tattoo on the inside of his wrist. However, he himself denied his initiation into the group. He claimed that at the time of the attack, he was under the influence of banned substance, which gave him courage and strength. According to him, he became addicted to substances because his parents were addicts. By November 2023, a report from a psychiatrist was ready. Accordingly, which Kyle Reuters was designated an especially dangerous criminal, according to experts. He lied about remorse for the murder. In reality, he did not regret what he had done. He even addressed the family of Lynette with an apology. But everyone thought that Kyle was doing this only to soften the sentence. After 4 years and 3 months since the brutal massacre, Kyle Reuters finally received a life sentence for the murders. Another 15 years were added to the term for desecration of the body and 5 for attempting to falsify evidence. The prosecution insisted that the case materials and Kyle's dossier include photographs from the scene of the massacre. The prosecutor's office believed that this would allow all participants in the process to understand what kind of monster was really in front of them if he were to become eligible for parole. This evidence would likely save the commission from making a rash decision. In fact, there was every reason to believe that Kyle was very dangerous during the search of his apartment. Many books on criminal law and forensic examination were found. Of course, they could have belonged to Teresa, who worked as a criminal lawyer. Nevertheless, more disturbing evidence was found directly in Kyle's room, namely, several notebooks with his handwriting in them. He fantasized about abuses and numerous murders. The most frightening notebook contained the names of 19 women on its pages. He called himself a master of manipulation. Closely tracking all the movements and habits of his future victims, Kyle meticulously followed each item on his list, documenting the schedule, work hours, and even filming everything on video. It appeared he planned that all the women noted in Kyle's notebook were destined for the same fate as Lynette, including one woman who had previously rejected his advances, which led Kyle to hold a grudge against her. Fortunately, law enforcement apprehended him before he could act on his plans. The officers had no doubt about his intentions, as Kyle not only took detailed notes but also outlined specific methods he intended to use against his victims on his laptop. Investigators discovered over a terabyte of disturbing content. Between April and August 2019, he visited numerous websites detailing chemicals that could induce unconsciousness or death. The forensic evidence also included accounts of notorious serial killings from criminal history. It was clear that Kyle was plotting a series of crimes and was meticulously preparing to evade capture. He showed particular interest in the actions of infamous serial killers like Ted Bundy, Jeffrey Dahmer, and Edmund Kemper, but he was especially fascinated by the Zodiac Killer, who had never been caught. On April 29, 2019, Kyle referred to himself as a charming psychopath and a smart serial killer. Fortunately, he was mistaken and did not have the opportunity to harm any other women. There is no evidence linking him to the murder of another resident, Anthony Mori. Kyle often fantasized about murdering women in his notebooks, which makes it unlikely that he intended to kill a man. However, cannot completely rule out the possibility, and Kyle remains the primary suspect in this case. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Samantha and Tessara Kresby. David Kresby comes from a family known for its success and respect. He is from Sacramento, California, and both he and his brother, along with their father, graduated from California State University. David earned an accounting degree with honors in 1983. His older brother, John, is the pride of the family, having become a professor of economics at Kansas State University. With his excellent academic performance, David easily found a job at a local bank, where he quickly rose to the position of CFO. However, the bank eventually closed. He then worked as a manager at a mortgage company in Sacramento. David has 2 children from his first marriage. However, his life took a difficult turn when his first wife died of a brain tumor. David devoted himself to providing for his children during this trying time. Fortunately, he soon met Kim, a woman he had known since college. Their friendship blossomed into a romantic relationship, and they began living together in 1994. Kim married David and adopted his children. In 1997, they welcomed a son, and 4 years later, they had twins, Tessara and Samantha. In total, David has 5 children with 2 women. In 2001, David moved to a new and promising bank, prompting his family to relocate to Matthews, a small town in the suburbs of Charlotte, North Carolina. By 2006, David Kresby was a vice president at a bank and lived with his family in a comfortable 3-story house in a prosperous area of Matthews. They had lived in this quiet neighborhood for nearly 5 years, which was considered an ideal place to raise children. The family shared a strong, loving bond and maintained a warm relationship with one another. David was regarded as a caring and active family man. They were actively involved in their local church, where David served on the finance committee. To many, it seemed that David had achieved his dream. What appeared to be a happy life actually concealed deeper problems. From a young age, David struggled with mental health issues. On the surface, he seemed to be a kind, devoted, successful, hard-working, and intelligent husband and father. However, he often suffered from severe bouts of depression that would come and go without warning. His condition worsened after the death of his first wife, but it only began to improve when Kim entered his life. She did her best to support him, and they both believed that this would help him overcome his challenges. Unfortunately, it was not enough. David's mental health issues began when he was 20 years old. At that time, he faced typical challenges in love and difficulties in planning for the future, which left him in a state of sadness. Adult life turned out to be more difficult than he had anticipated. Despite this, David still managed to excel in everything he did and worked tirelessly, not realizing that his success came at a high cost. As a young man, David did not seek help and preferred to solve problems on his own. As an adult, his depression often stemmed from the increased demands of his job and the responsibilities he assumed. His family was aware of his difficulties, and his colleagues noticed when he occasionally fell into a state of depression. However, David usually recovered quite quickly. There were no serious consequences for his work life. People understood his situation. He could take a day off, but his colleagues covered for him and provided sick leave when necessary. Their support seemed justified because, while his depression was in remission, David excelled in his field. The situation became increasingly serious. David was a devout Catholic, as was his entire family, according to his faith. End life was considered a sin. Despite this belief, David frequently contemplated end life during his time as vice president and even attempted it several times without success. During this period, David chose to spend time outdoors, searching for a suitable place to end his life instead of working. His wife tried to intervene and save him during these moments. After each attempt, David promised his family that he would not try to commit end life again. David struggled with depression that he could not control. Simply promising himself not to harm himself did not help him dispel his dark thoughts. His frustration grew. Instead of feeling like harming himself, he began to have thoughts about harming others. One time, when David and Kim were stopped at a traffic light, he seriously considered driving into a crowd. His wife thought he was joking. Unaware of how sincere his feelings were at this time, David tried several prescription medications, but they were ineffective. His attempts to deal with his mental health issues on his own made him paranoid and withdrawn. He became increasingly anxious about losing his job and going bankrupt. Often imagining the worst-case scenarios, Kim encouraged him to see a psychiatrist, who prescribed him antidepressants. David agreed and committed to the treatment regimen the doctor gave him. David had been on one medication for years, but it caused him to gain weight, which frustrated him. Annoyed by this side effect, he decided to stop taking the medication and try something else. He returned to the psychiatrist, hoping to adjust his treatment regimen for better results. By 2006, he was very familiar with his mental health problems, which had become more frequent and intense during these times. He was haunted by thoughts of harming others. David often thought about ending his life voluntarily, but because of his promise not to harm himself, he considered harming others instead. Although he saw his doctor regularly, he never revealed these feelings. Hoping that a prescription medication would help him manage his difficulties, he feared losing everything he had built. He understood that if his doctor knew about his obsessive thoughts, it could lead to serious consequences, such as hospitalization loss of his job, or separation from his wife and children. He tried not to think about harming others and fought against these thoughts. David's last appointment with a psychiatrist was on January 19, 2006. Shortly before the tragic events occurred, the psychiatrist prescribed new medication, believing that David was struggling with sleep problems and anxiety. He had also recently changed his previous medication, which could cause weight gain. The psychiatrist did not notice anything unusual. David was very good at hiding his emotions and preferred to rely on himself. On the morning of January 20, 2006, David's family was at home. Kim, David, and their 5-year-old twins, Samantha and Tessera, whom David adored, were all together. David was on sick leave due to his battle with depression. At that time, everything seemed normal, and there was no sign that anything was wrong. At 11:30 a.m., David received a call from his mother. It was a routine check-in. She was aware of his mental health issues and called at the same time every day to see how he was doing, and if he needed any support. They talked for about 15 minutes, during which David reassured her that everything was fine. His 3 older children were at school at the time at 12:15 p.m., while Samantha and Tessera were having lunch. Kim was looking after them. She felt confident that nothing would happen to the children because David loved them very much. She believed that they would be safe with him. Kim had gone out to get a haircut after lunch. David worked on the computer, but then took a break to spend time with his daughters. He suggested they play hide and seek, and they scattered to find hiding places around the house. David went into the kitchen and laid out some knives on the table. He then began to search for the twins. He saw Samantha first. She was smiling and unaware of the dark thoughts in his mind, deciding to end the game. He quietly took her to the kitchen. Suddenly, he picked her up and placed her on the kitchen table. He took a knife and began to attack Samantha. The little girl screamed and struggled, and then she stopped breathing, hearing strange noises. Tessera came out of hiding and saw her father attacking Samantha, even though she was only 5 years old. She sensed that something terrible was happening, fearing for her own safety. She hid on the second floor of the house. Unfortunately, Tessera was easily discovered in the bathroom of the master bedroom. The little girl begged David not to hurt her, but David ignored her cries. He pinned her to the floor and began to attack her with a knife. Tessera cried, screamed, and fought fiercely against her father, but all in vain. Once a loving father, he had now left his 2 young daughters lifeless. David then considered end life, but ultimately decided against it. Instead of running away, he showered, changed clothes, and called 911. During the call, he calmly confessed that he had killed his 2 daughters and attempted CPR. Although he believed it was useless, as they were already dead, he answered the police's questions clearly, providing his details, his phone number, and his wife's location. He appeared calm rather than distressed and requested emergency assistance, expressing his desire to end his life. After the call ended, the police quickly arrived at David's home. David's home is located on Creek Road in an affluent area, where his family lives in a villa. It was surprising that such a tragic event could happen in a place known for its prosperity. When the police arrived, David was found sitting outside the house, waiting for them and for his wife Kim, who was still at the beauty salon. He surrendered and accompanied the police back to the house. Kim later returned home and learned of the situation. Initially, Kim feared that her husband had committed end life, but when she learned the truth, she was shocked. The police placed David under 24-hour surveillance and provided him with specialized clothing designed to prevent self-harm, removing any dangerous objects from his immediate vicinity. The case attracted considerable public attention, as a prominent and wealthy man faced the possibility of the death penalty, which is legal in North Carolina. It is reported that David may reach a plea deal with the prosecution if he admits to 2 counts of first-degree murder. The prosecutor's office will agree not to pursue the death penalty. As a result, David could face life in prison without parole. Many feel that this sentence is too lenient for the deaths of Samantha and Tessara, two innocent girls. During questioning, David mentioned that he had been dealing with depression and suggested that his actions were influenced by a new medication prescribed by his doctor. David has spoken openly about his illness, seemingly trying to shift the prosecutor's focus to his condition, which he believes caused the tragic events. He stated that he had struggled with depression for years and had finally reached a point where he could no longer bear it. Over the past few months, his condition had worsened significantly. He revealed that he had intended to harm strangers with his car, but also admitted that he had darker thoughts about his wife and 5 children while they slept. Amid his financial struggles, he was overwhelmed by the fear of losing his job as a bank vice president. He felt disillusioned by his inability to provide for his wife and children, which left him feeling unstable. On that day, he heard voices in his head telling him that there was no future, that everything was ruined, and that he had to kill his daughters. David believed that the twins were also suffering from depression, which was why they were not attending kindergarten. He eventually came to the disturbing conclusion that killing Samantha and Tessara might ease his own pain and prevent his mental health from deteriorating further. Kim shocked many by forgiving and supporting David. Despite his violent actions, she felt the death penalty was too harsh and believed it would not bring her children back to life. Despite her heartache over the tragedy, Kim has repeatedly told the media that executing David would only cause further harm to the family. She expressed relief that her husband did not commit end life before the police arrived. Kim believes that his actions stemmed from mental health issues that he could not control, including severe depression and psychosis. She remains hopeful that he will eventually recover and return to the loving and calm person he once was. The Supreme Court is reviewing the death penalty. Some believe that David deserves the death penalty for killing his 2 children. However, the prosecutor was reluctant to pursue this option because it would be difficult to convince all 12 jurors. As a result, the inquest continues to investigate more disturbing evidence beyond David's confession. David's attorneys have prepared a strong argument against the death penalty, emphasizing his long history of severe mental illness, which has spanned more than 2 decades. Prior to this tragic event, David had no criminal record. He was a devoted family man and a respectable citizen. There was no history of aggressive behavior in his past, and he had never harmed his wife or children. As Kim and other family members confirmed, the defense argued that on January 20, David's mental illness led to the tragic deaths of his 2 children. The attorneys, along with all of David's relatives, believed that he was experiencing a psychotic episode at the time of the incident. Kim stated that he had been working hard for years to control his mental health issues and had been successful. They had consulted with professionals, and he had been prescribed medication. However, Kim felt that the treatment he received was not effective enough. Over the years, the family continued to seek help and adhered to the treatment plan, ensuring that he took his medication as prescribed. A psychological evaluation revealed that David had more serious mental health problems than initially thought, rather than just depression and anxiety. He was diagnosed with psychosis. It became clear that the medications prescribed were not appropriate for his condition. Several years before the incident, David had been diagnosed with genital cancer and had been successfully treated on the day of the tragedy. He was scheduled for a follow-up appointment. His attorneys presented medical documents showing that he had been prescribed several medications, one for depression, another for anxiety, and a third to help him sleep. While on the antidepressants, David gained more than 20 kg and had difficulty breathing, which forced him to stop taking the medication. His doctor then prescribed another medication in January, but it did not resolve his sleep problems. He finally returned to the doctor just 1 day before the murder. Medical records show that David's treating physician removed his sedative and sleeping pills and prescribed a different sleeping pill instead. After this change, David began to notice alterations in his mental state, impairing his ability to think clearly. The day before the twins were murdered, he became delirious and acted erratically. Experiencing extreme mood swings, this exacerbated his anxiety about not being able to provide for his family. However, management at the bank where he worked described David as having an excellent work record, with no indication that he was in danger of losing his job. Despite this reassurance, David's mental state left him vulnerable to irrational fears. He worried that he might not receive a bonus from the bank, recalling that he had earned $45 the year before, but doubting that he would receive the same amount again. However, he later discovered that the bank had approved a large bonus during this difficult time. David was not in a clear state of mind and could not think rationally while awaiting the hearing in the case of Samantha and Tessara's murder. Kim visited her husband frequently. She repeatedly expressed her deep faith and love for him, believing that one day they would overcome the challenges caused by his illness and avoid such terrible tragedies. Kim only knew David as a kind and loving person. She believed that inadequate treatment led to the deaths of their children and the pain the family endured afterward. The scene of the crime was tragic. It is hard to imagine the pain Kim felt when she returned from the beauty salon to find the police and paramedics carrying her daughter's bodies. In fact, David's troubled thoughts began long before these tragic events. At the time, David was being treated with prescription medications. The initial treatment regimen helped control his negative thoughts to some extent, but things changed when adjustments were made. Experts later concluded that the new drugs had caused acute psychosis, according to David's own confession. When Samantha and Tessara were only 1 year old, he had thoughts of harming them. One day, while walking with the girls in the backyard, he hid a weapon in his pocket. Fortunately, he regained his composure and realized that he needed to stop. He convinced himself that he could overcome his challenges and that his family's financial situation would improve. David later returned to the doctor, but avoided discussing his thoughts of harming his children. Instead, he vaguely mentioned having bad thoughts about harming others and expressed his fear of losing his children and family by withholding information. He likely misled his doctors. As a result, he was prescribed medications that he had taken previously, which led to weight gain. In his confession, David admitted that, for many years, he had often felt like harming a family member, but he had been able to control these impulses until now. He believed that he had everything under control and could never actually act on the harmful thoughts. David recounted that after his wife got a haircut one morning, he was working on his computer when the obsessive thought returned. It urged him to kill his children. He thought that if he did so, all his worries would disappear because he would have no one to care for. David realized that his mental problems were related to his actions. During his initial interrogations, David responded coldly. When asked why he killed both girls instead of just one, he explained that because they were twins, they needed to die together. However, the situation changed when David received comprehensive treatment. It was only then that he understood the severity of his crime. He admitted that he had never shared his thoughts about killing his children. His wife, Kim, did not fully understand the gravity of her husband's condition. David's doctor was not held responsible after the tragedy. Citing David's failure to provide accurate information, the doctor was unaware of many of David's hidden struggles, which prevented him from fully assessing the situation. Furthermore, all medications have side effects that can vary from person to person, and doctors cannot predict such severe reactions. David received support and treatment while in prison, which had a positive impact on him. During his preliminary hearing, he began to understand the extent of his responsibility for his actions and fully admitted his guilt. Psychiatrists confirmed that he was fit to stand trial. David's family was shocked by what had happened. His father had seen him just a week before the tragic event. He appeared healthy and showed no signs of impending disaster. On July 30, 2006, the hearings took place. Ultimately, David Kresby reached a plea deal and pleaded guilty, while the prosecutor's office chose not to pursue the death penalty. This decision caused considerable controversy, dividing public opinion. With one group calling for the death penalty, the trial was brief, and the jury sentenced David Kresby to 2 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole. The trial was short but filled with deep emotion. David's family cried, and he struggled to hold back tears as he came to terms with the pain his actions had caused. He felt he would be haunted by guilt for the rest of his life. Even the police officers who had arrived at the scene that day were in tears. A young officer went upstairs and discovered Tessera's body. He checked for a pulse, hoping she was still alive. The police carried the injured child down the stairs, praying that she would survive. However, when the doctors examined the body, it was clear that she had died from her injuries. What the police felt as a pulse may have been his own heartbeat. This story raises many questions. Was David truly unaware of what was happening at the time? Were his actions influenced by a psychotic episode? He appeared normal when he talked to his mother and wife and went to work. However, his actions were completely different. When his wife, Kim, left the house, everything seemed normal. But he caused a massacre right afterward. He considered end life, but decided against it and tried to calm down. So why didn't he try to control himself in the moment when he killed the child? Welcome back to our channel. Today, we will explore a new case. The case of Carla Faye Tucker. The events began on the morning of June 13, 1983, when the Texas Police Department responded to an urgent call from a man. Officers were dispatched to a house in the northeastern part of the city. Inside, they discovered the bodies of a man and a woman who had been brutally killed with a pickaxe. Initially, investigators suspected the murders were the result of a robbery gone wrong, but the sheer savagery of the crime made this theory unlikely. Once the victims' identities were confirmed and their backgrounds investigated, new revelations emerged that drastically changed the direction of the case. Houston, Texas, with a population of over 1 million, is the largest city in the region and the hub of Harris County. It is home to people of various religions and cultural backgrounds who live together in this diverse community. However, as the population grows, so does the crime rate, and Houston is now ranked among the top 100 most dangerous cities in America. On the morning of June 13, 1983, a man waited for his colleague, Jerry Lynn Dean, to pick him up for work. Jerry, however, never arrived. They had recently signed a contract for a security system installation job, and he knew Jerry was not the type to miss work without a good reason. Since they lived close to each other, he decided to check on Jerry after waiting for some time, assuming his colleague might have overslept. When Gregory reached Jerry's apartment, he noticed the door was slightly open. He stepped inside and called out for Jerry, but received no response. He found the TV and the sound system were tangled together, and Jerry's motorcycle, which Jerry had been working on, was gone. Concerned, he began searching all over the apartment. Eventually, he opened the door to the guest bedroom. Little did he know that he was about to discover something horrifying. Jerry was found lying on the floor next to the bed, surrounded by a pool of blood. On the bed was a woman unfamiliar to he, with a pickaxe lodged in her chest. Horrified by the gruesome scene, he fled the apartment and went straight home to call the police. When the police arrived at the apartment, they observed that the space was in disarray, with tools, motorcycle parts, and dirty clothes scattered across the floor. In the guest bedroom, they discovered the bodies of Jerry and the unknown woman. The officers documented the crime scene, including the pickaxe, which was identified as the murder weapon. One officer removed the pickaxe from the woman's chest and placed it aside for collection as evidence. The bodies were sent to the Harris County Medical Examiner's office for autopsy. During questioning, the colleague said to the investigators that the apartment door had been open when he arrived, and the interior looked as though someone had ransacked it. He also noticed that Jerry's motorcycle and blue Chevrolet El Camino pickup truck were missing. A search of the apartment revealed that both victims' wallets had also disappeared. Additionally, investigators discovered that the bird hammer used in the attack was taken from Jerry's toolkit. The detectives found no evidence of forced entry into the apartment. Neighbors mentioned hearing loud noises from the apartment early in the morning, but did not call the police, as they neither heard cries for help nor explosion and assumed nothing serious had occurred. Investigators theorized that the perpetrator was either someone the victims knew and willingly let in, or someone who entered through a door that was accidentally unlocked. Meanwhile, the severity of the attack pointed to the possibility of a premeditated murder. The autopsy revealed that Jerry sustained 28 pickaxe wounds, a head injury caused by a blunt object striking the back of his skull through fingerprints. The police identified Deborah Ruth Thornton as the second victim. She suffered 15 pickaxe wounds to her head and chest, with a fatal strike piercing her heart, after ruling out random theft. Investigators turned their attention to the victim's close contacts. Jerry had met Deborah just the day before at a pool party. This was the first time they had met. Friends at the party stated that Deborah had attended to relax and escape her personal problems. Further inquiries revealed that Deborah was married and had 2 children. So, suspicion first fell on her husband. The husband was questioned and told investigators that on the evening of June 12, he had been at home with his children. He acknowledged that he and his wife had been having misunderstandings recently, but insisted he loved her and would never harm her. He claimed to know nothing about Deborah's infidelity and said he had never heard of a man named Jerry before. Investigators confirmed the husband's alibi and ruled him out as a suspect afterward. They learn of another person who may have held a grudge: Deborah's father, William. William had a criminal past, including a conviction for assault, for which he had served time. He currently owned a large business in Texas, but was under investigation for tax evasion. Further investigation revealed that Deborah had once been called to testify in court against her father, which could have provided a motive for murder. William was questioned, but he denied any involvement in the crime. Investigators kept him under surveillance for several weeks, but found no evidence connecting him to the double murder. Another team of investigators began looking into Jerry's past, uncovering that he, too, was surrounded by complex relationships. Jerry worked as a mechanic, and among those who knew him, a woman named Carla Tucker. Carla, known for her love of partying, had a strained relationship with Jerry. The tension started when Carla first met Jerry, the boyfriend of Sean. From the start, she had a poor impression of him. She thought he was weak and unsuitable for her best friend. Their conflict escalated after an incident at Carla's apartment. Jerry had parked his motorcycle in her living room, and oil leaked from the bike, staining her carpet. Furious, Carla eventually kicked Jerry out of her apartment that night. In the months that followed, their animosity deepened. One day, when Carla and Sean planned a trip to see their favorite bands, Jerry became very upset. He found Carla's photo album and cut out all her pictures, including the only photo she had with her mother. This act infuriated Carla, and she tried to persuade Sean to end her relationship with Jerry. However, instead of separating, Sean and Jerry moved in together and got married. Despite everything, Carla remained convinced that her friend had made a mistake by choosing Jerry. A month after the wedding, Sean visited Carla's house to collect a jacket. During the visit, Carla mentioned that she no longer wanted to see Jerry. Upon hearing that Jerry had parked outside near her house, Carla stormed outside, confronted him, hit him in the face, and broke his glasses. This incident led to Jerry being taken to the hospital to remove glass fragments from his eye. In June of the same year, Sean and Jerry separated, citing accusations of domestic violence and clashing lifestyles. In retaliation for the alleged abuse she claimed to have suffered, Sean withdrew a large sum of money from Jerry's account and went shopping with Carla. After hearing this, Jerry allegedly began plotting his revenge. Rumors circulated that he had hired someone to attack Carla, intending to disfigure her. Their volatile relationship quickly attracted the attention of investigators. Carla was born on November 18, 1959, in Houston, Texas. To Larry and Carolyn, she had two much older sisters who were said to have negatively influenced her. This influence contributed to Carla starting to smoke at just 8 years old. When she was 10, her parents divorced, and she discovered that Larry was not her biological father. By the age of 12, Carla had begun use with banned substance and lived loosely with men. At 14, she dropped out of school and, following her mother's example, started working as an escort. Carolyn even taught Carla how to use her body to earn money. Around this time, Carla's sister introduced her to men who frequented biker clubs. Carla and her mother also became passionate fans of rock music and began traveling with music groups, embracing a carefree and unconventional lifestyle. Carla adapted quickly to this new way of living. At 16, she met Stephen Griffith, a laborer, and the two planned to marry. However, Carla found married life overwhelming. They frequently argued, and their fights often turned physical. Stephen even told his friends that Carla could hit harder than any man he knew. After 2 years of constant conflict, they decided to separate, and Carla returned to her previous lifestyle. When Carla was 20, Carolyn passed away. By that time, Carla had returned to spending time in biker clubs. It was during this period that she became close friends with Sean Dean. Their bond grew strong. The detectives questioned Carla. She admitted to having disagreements with Jerry, but denied any involvement in the crime. Carla allowed the police to take her fingerprints and initially agreed to a polygraph test, but later refused it after her boyfriend advised against it. The fingerprints provided no useful leads, as experts couldn't find viable evidence at the crime scene or on the murder weapon. However, Carla's sudden refusal to take a lie detector test made the detectives even more suspicious of her. Even so, this was not enough to add Carla or Sean to the list of suspects. Detectives continued visiting them regularly, hoping one of them would slip up. Carla appeared completely unbothered and carried on with her life, attending parties as usual. Weeks passed, and detectives still could not find any evidence linking of them. A detective from the homicide department took an interest in the case after hearing the name Daniel Ryan Garrett. Carla's boyfriend, the detective, had grown up in the same neighborhood as Daniel and also acquainted with Daniel's ex-wife. The detective contacted Daniel's ex-wife and asked if she had any information about Daniel or Carla's potential involvement in the Houston double murder. She confessed that she had not seen her ex-husband for a long time and expressed a desire to talk to him about it. On July 18, 1983, the Houston Police Department received an urgent call, judging by the voice on the other end of the line. The caller sounded extremely nervous. He demanded to speak specifically to this detective. It was Daniel's brother, and he claimed to have information about the murder. Daniel's brother confessed that he had kept this information a secret for 5 weeks. He also mentioned a third individual, James Leibrandt, a friend of his, who was present at Jerry's house on the night of the incident. He warned that the situation was escalating because Carla had been talking about killing one of the witnesses to silence them. During his interrogation, he said that early in the morning of June 13, Daniel and Carla arrived at his house in a blue pickup truck. Carla bragged that she had taken care of Jerry and an unidentified woman, and both of them asked him to help destroy the evidence. Initially, he hesitated to get involved, but ultimately decided to assist. He burned Jerry's wallet in an ashtray, and the stolen motorcycle parts were dumped into a nearby ditch. On July 20, 1983, Daniel's brother rode a motorcycle to Carla's house with a transmitter hidden under his shirt and a recorder concealed in his shoe. The detective and the investigative team listened from a surveillance van parked a block away. Daniel's brother casually started the conversation, carefully guiding it toward the topic of the killing. Ultimately, the suspect, Carla, provided a detailed account of what happened on the night of June 12. Carla had organized a birthday party for her sister. The celebration lasted the entire weekend, with friends coming and going, drinking alcohol, and using banned substance, which were plentiful in the house. By Sunday evening, when only James, Daniel, and Carla remained. She told Daniel that she felt overwhelmed with emotions and energy. The three of them began discussing a planned crime, and Carla suggested stealing Jerry's motorbike and selling it for parts to make money. She expressed her deep hatred for Jerry and said she wanted to make him pay for everything he had done to her and Sean. Around 3 a.m., they went to Jerry's house. They entered without any trouble because Carla had stolen an extra set of keys several weeks earlier. At the time, she didn't know why she had taken the keys, but they ended up being crucial on the night of the murder. During a recorded conversation, Daniel's brother asked if they had planned to kill anyone when they entered the house. Carla replied no, explaining that everything had happened spontaneously at the time. Carla was intoxicated and under the influence of banned substance. She sat on top of Jerry as he woke up. Trying to restrain him, Jerry attempted to free himself by grabbing her hands, but at that moment, Daniel struck him multiple times in the head with a hammer while in her drunken and drugged state. Carla became irritated by the gurgling sounds Jerry, who was dying, was making in a fit of rage. She grabbed a pickaxe and struck his body with it. Carla later admitted that using the flat side of the pickaxe gave her a feeling of arousal. Daniel struck the final, deadly blow to Jerry's head with the hammer and then left the room. At that moment, Carla noticed a woman hidden under a blanket in the corner of the bed. Up to that point, she had been so focused on Jerry that she hadn't realized someone else was there. Carla and the woman began to struggle. Their fight continued until Daniel returned, overcome by rage. Carla attacked the woman repeatedly with the pickaxe, eventually driving it straight into her heart. Daniel was arrested just a block from his home while heading to work. At the same time, armed police officers entered Carla's house to take her into custody. James Leibrandt, who was visiting Carla as a guest, was also arrested at the police station. All of Carla's friends were questioned. They shared what they knew, providing consistent accounts, and all noted that Carla had always disliked Jerry. However, both Carla and Daniel remained silent during questioning. Carla claimed she had been drugged and could not remember anything about that night during the investigation. Leibrandt cooperated with authorities and testified against Carla and Daniel. He claimed that after using the banned substance, he felt restless and needed something to relieve himself, leading to his involvement in the theft scheme ultimately resulted in Leibrandt receiving a light sentence. Carla and Daniel were charged with the murders of Jerry and Deborah. Both were held in Harris County Jail without bail. In September 1983, they appeared in court, but their trials were held separately. Carla faced charges for both murders, while Daniel, after testifying at a hearing, had the charge for Deborah's murder dropped. Carla pleaded not guilty and remained in jail awaiting her trial. During her detention, jail staff reported that Carla behaved defiantly and provocatively. Everything changed, however, while awaiting trial. She began to recover from the effects of alcohol and banned substance. She started reading books from the prison library and, for the first time in her life, picked up a Bible. Later, Carla admitted to her cellmates and the staff that it was during this time she began to understand the consequences of her actions. She started attending Alcoholics Anonymous meetings, where she met others whose lives had been destroyed by these toxic things. Inspired by their stories, Carla created her own Bible study group and resolved to become a better person. When Carla repented, she realized that the Lord forgives those who are lost. She came to believe that holding on to guilt and failing to seek forgiveness blocks one's connection to God and fills life with bitterness. Feeling forgiven by the Lord, Carla's heart became filled with love, which she believed should guide her life. In 1984, Carla stood trial for the murder of Jerry and Deborah. She explained that, at the time of the crime, she was heavily under the influence of banned substance and alcohol. Carla said that the murder was not planned, but occurred as a sudden outburst of anger during a robbery. Fueled by the substances she had consumed, several witnesses for the defense supported her lawyers. arguing that Carla and Daniel, on that night, were unable to distinguish right from wrong. However, the jury could not reach a unanimous verdict on her guilt. Carla was given the chance to testify on her own behalf before the judge made the final decision. She spoke for nearly 5 hours, sharing details about her past and stating that only after being imprisoned did she fully understand her actions, despite her emotional testimony. Carla was ultimately sentenced to death by lethal injection, becoming the only woman in Texas to receive this punishment. In November 1984, Carla testified at Daniel's trial, hoping he would not be convicted. However, he was also sentenced to death. That marked the last time Carla and Daniel saw each other, while the legal system labeled Carla a murderer. Many saw her as a symbol of reform, initially resigned to her fate of dying by lethal injection. Carla's outlook changed in 1993 when she learned that Daniel, who was awaiting execution, had died of liver disease. This motivated her to fight for her own life with the support of a prison chaplain. She began the process of appealing her case. Carla appealed to have her death sentence reduced to life imprisonment. Her request gained support from notable figures, including Pope John Paul II, the Prime Minister of Italy, Romano Prodi, U.S. House Speaker Newt Gingrich, and televangelist Pat Robertson. Surprisingly, Ronald Carlson, the brother of the victims, Deborah, also supported clemency after witnessing Carla's transformation during her time in prison. Even Hans, the warden of the Huntsville's prison, testified that Carla had been an exemplary inmate. The decision now rested with the Texas Board of Pardons and Paroles, which was responsible for recommending whether her death sentence should be commuted. However, the final authority belonged to Governor Texas George W. Bush. On January 28, 1998, the board rejected Carla's request. In response, she wrote a letter to Governor Bush, acknowledging her actions as acts of extreme cruelty and recounting her journey of transformation. Despite her plea, the governor denied her final appeal just hours before her execution, refusing to commute her death sentence to life imprisonment. On February 2, 1998, Carla requested a peach, a banana, and a salad with dressing as her last meal, according to prison authorities. She spent the morning with her family from 8 a.m. to noon. While many hoped her final hours would remain peaceful, others anticipated that the day would be emotionally difficult for all involved until the very end. People awaited the governor's decision. Would he grant her mercy? On February 3, 1998, Carla Tucker was executed by lethal injection in Texas. She had requested the presence of her sister, Kari Weeks, and some friends during her final moments at 6:45 p.m., 8 minutes after the injection. She was pronounced dead. Carla was the first woman to be executed in Texas in 135 years since the reinstatement of the death penalty. Carla was buried at Forest Park, Lawndale Cemetery in Houston later. Accusations arose against Governor Bush, alleging that he lacked compassion for Carla during the appeals process. In response, Bush issued a statement expressing that he had forgiven her, but emphasized that justice still needed to be served for the 2 lives she had taken. Carla inspired the creation of several fictional characters in stories that explored her troubled upbringing and how it eventually led to her crimes. Fred Allen, the execution team's captain, revealed that overseeing Carla's execution caused him deep emotional turmoil. He later resigned from his role in the Texas prison system and became a vocal critic of the death penalty. Allen argued that no one has the moral right to take another person's life, even if it is sanctioned by the law. He also shared that when Carla was brought in, he realized she was the first woman scheduled for execution, and he vividly remembered the details of that day. Carla looked at him and said, "Thank you, Allen, for everything you are doing." Allen replied, "You're welcome," and fastened the safety strap. Other members of the team carried out the necessary procedures, and everything proceeded as expected. When Carla was pronounced dead, Allen and the others placed her body on the stretcher, removed the straps, and went about their usual tasks. However, shortly afterward, Alan suddenly imagined the pain Carla must have felt. He broke into a cold sweat, began trembling, and burst into tears. It was a deeply shocking experience for him. The changes Carla underwent in prison profoundly affected many who had initially seen her as nothing more than an antisocial individual. Hello, crime enthusiasts. Are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Stephanie Fernandez. In 2009, Stephanie Fernandez was living in Massachusetts with her 6-year-old daughter, Angelina. Stephanie, a single mother, was struggling financially and had no money to support them. She had learned to dance while she was in school and was quite flexible to make ends meet. Stephanie decided to earn money by dancing in nightclubs and performing for men. She kept her work a secret from Angelina, who only knew that her mother worked nights. One night at work, Stephanie noticed a handsome man staring at her after her performance. She approached him, and they talked for an hour. His name was Andrew Wagner. During their first conversation, they seemed to get along well and discovered they had a lot in common. Stephanie gave him her phone number, and they arranged to meet after her shift, where they both admitted their feelings for each other at the time. Andrew worked at a tire shop, but he aspired to be a police officer and was looking for an opportunity in that field. Stephanie and Andrew's relationship progressed quickly. She introduced Andrew to her daughter, Angelina, and they soon began living together. Angelina called Andrew her stepfather and treated him like a friend. They enjoyed spending time together, often watching television. However, over time, their love began to fade. Andrew and Stephanie started to argue, largely because Andrew was upset with Stephanie's job as a dancer in a nightclub. He wanted her to perform only for him and was unhappy that she continued to work there, even though Stephanie had quit her job for a while. Their arguments continued. One day, Angelina witnessed Andrew grabbing her mother's head and nearly slamming her into a wall, despite their troubled relationship. In 2012, 3 years after they first met, Andrew proposed to Stephanie and gave her a ring. She happily accepted his proposal and agreed to marry him. At the same time, Andrew started a new job at a correctional facility, bringing him closer to his dream of working in law enforcement. It seemed like their relationship had improved. But by early 2013, Stephanie decided to leave Andrew and rekindle her relationship with her ex-boyfriend Michael, who was 13 years her senior. Stephanie and Michael first met when she was 19 and he was 32. They began dating in the early 20s, but their relationship ended after a while. In 2013, when Stephanie was 30, she rekindled her relationship with Michael a few months later. He proposed to her at the same place they had first met and gave her a $44 ring. Stephanie accepted his proposal, but just a month later, they had a serious argument at Michael's house. During the argument, Stephanie picked up a kitchen knife and swung it at him. Michael disarmed her, and it seemed like the matter was resolved. However, the conflict escalated during another argument. This time, Stephanie picked up a knife again, and Michael defended himself by using a chair as a shield. Stephanie stabbed the chair 4 times before leaving the room. Concerned for their safety, Michael gathered all the knives in the house and hid them. After these incidents, Michael decided that he did not want to marry Stephanie anymore and broke off the engagement just a month after the proposal. In late 2013, Stephanie got back together with Andrew and moved into a new house with him. After moving to their new home in Massachusetts, tensions flared again between Andrew and Stephanie. They decided it was time to plan for a pregnancy and set a wedding date for October 2014. On the evening of May 7, 2014, Stephanie put her daughter Angelina to bed on the 2nd floor and went into the kitchen to prepare dinner. Andrew was in the living room, watching TV. That night, they each had 2 glasses of wine. During the conversation, Andrew began asking Stephanie what she had done that week while he was at work. Andrew accused Stephanie of cheating on him, and the couple began to argue. After a while, Andrew expressed a desire to be intimate, but Stephanie refused. In a fit of anger, he threw her onto the couch, grabbed her by the neck with one hand, and tried to pull down her pants. He then grabbed a nearby weapon and pointed it at Stephanie's head, threatening her. When Andrew backed away, and Stephanie quickly ran into the kitchen to grab a knife, telling him to stay away from her. After this encounter, Andrew became even angrier. He grabbed her head and tried to smash it against the wall. In desperation, Stephanie attacked him with the knife. Andrew fell to the floor, and she began to cry loudly. Unable to find a phone to call 911, she ran to her neighbor, who was a nurse, for help. The neighbor opened the door. Not knowing what was happening, she saw Stephanie standing there in a t-shirt and sweatpants. Stephanie desperately called for help, saying that her fiancé was bleeding. She explained that she had injured him in self-defense because he had threatened her with a weapon. Hearing the emergency, the neighbor and his wife, who had worked as paramedics, quickly rushed to Andrew's house. When they entered, they saw the weapon Andrew had threatened his wife with lying on the sofa. They then found Andrew lying on the floor. His lips were black and blue, and there was a film covering his eyes. The neighbors found Andrew with a deep wound to his neck. They then took off his shirt to try to stop the bleeding. Meanwhile, the neighbor's daughter ran into Andrew's house, called 911, and reported the situation. During this time, Stephanie was nearby, screaming and crying nonstop. At one point, she pushed Andrew, trying to wake him up. The neighbors yelled at Stephanie to stop and told her to be quiet. They then did everything they could to save him. At this point, Stephanie's screams woke up her daughter, Angelina, who was sleeping on the second floor. She left her room and went downstairs. Angelina saw a horrifying scene, prompting Stephanie to order her to go back to her room and away from the traumatic scene. At this point, Andrew had stopped breathing. The neighbors began CPR and continued until the police and ambulance arrived. Paramedics instructed the neighbors to stay back while they assessed Andrew's condition and took him to the hospital. The police then searched the house and discovered a kitchen knife on the bathroom floor, which was determined to be the murder weapon. Angelina was taken to stay with a relative, worried about her mother. She became hysterical. Stephanie was taken to the police station, where she was questioned for 3 hours. She cried and begged for information about Andrew, expressing her love for him and her family. She was extremely distressed, saying that she did not care about her fate as long as Andrew was alive. During the questioning, Stephanie asked about her daughter. The police also noted a large bruise on Stephanie's face and a bite mark on her hand. At the end of the interrogation, they informed Stephanie that Andrew had died in the hospital. Upon hearing this, Stephanie confessed that she had attacked Andrew with a knife in self-defense, stating that she had no other choice. After her confession, she was arrested and charged with first-degree murder. The medical examiner determined that Andrew died from blood loss due to his injuries, and his injuries indicated that he had not attempted to defend himself. There was a small amount of alcohol in his blood. On June 13, 2014, nearly a month after the incident, Andrew's father went to his son's house to change the locks and discovered that someone had cleaned the house and wiped all the blood off the walls and floors. It was revealed that Stephanie's sister had hired a cleaning service, which cleaned the house on May 20. Stephanie provided the police with a photo from 2010 showing her with a black eye. Claiming that Andrew had attacked her, she recounted an incident in which Andrew became angry over the t-shirt she was wearing. He allegedly grabbed her, threw her onto the bed, tore the t-shirt off, and then held a weapon to her head. Stephanie stated that when Andrew was angry, he could be very intimidating. Cell phone records revealed that the relationship between Andrew and Stephanie was troubled and turbulent. The police had to review 18 pages of text messages on one particular day in August 2013. A photo of a deep cut on Andrew's right forearm was found on his phone that same day. He texted Stephanie asking for help because the wound was bleeding profusely, but she replied that it was none of her business and that she would not assist him in calling the police. Stephanie admitted that they had an argument and that she had accidentally injured his hand in September 2013. Andrew sent Stephanie an angry text message accusing her of having an affair with Michael, and he insulted Michael in the process. In her reply, Stephanie admitted that she was indeed dating Michael. After this exchange, Stephanie sent private photos of herself to both Andrew and Michael within hours of each other. About a month later, in October 2013, Stephanie told Andrew that Michael wanted to adopt Angelina. In that text message, she stated that she did not care about his future. Andrew informed Stephanie that he planned to buy a house and wanted to meet her for a serious talk. Meanwhile, she also sent affectionate text messages to her ex-fiancé, Michael, who had called off their engagement. Stephanie invited Michael to go on vacation together and asked him for money for yacht. But Michael declined and suggested that she find another job. In December 2013, Stephanie went on yacht and began texting Andrew, sharing how much fun she was having. She also asked him if he had a girlfriend after the cruise. Stephanie reconciled with Andrew and moved into his new home. Their text messages revealed that she had become pregnant shortly after they got back together. Although things seemed to be improving, Stephanie frequently expressed to Andrew that she felt abandoned by his long hours and lack of communication. In January 2014, at a doctor's appointment, Stephanie received the devastating news that her baby's heartbeat had stopped. She texted Andrew, saying that she felt like she had lost a part of herself. Andrew's parents noticed that their son was becoming more distant and that their communication was decreasing. In February 2014, just 3 months before the tragedy, Andrew's mother tried to contact him but was unable to reach him by phone. Concerned, she and her husband went to the house where Andrew lived with Stephanie. When they arrived, they saw both their cars in the driveway but received no response after ringing the doorbell several times. After about 15 minutes, Andrew finally opened the door to let his parents in. They spent some time talking and exploring the first floor of the new home. Shortly after, Stephanie came down from the second floor and told Andrew's parents to leave. They quietly left the house and drove away. Andrew's parents accused Stephanie of trying to prevent their son from communicating with the family. 8 years after the tragedy, in early 2022, the trial for the murder of Andrew Wagner began. Stephanie was placed under house arrest with a Jeep's ankle bracelet that tracked her movements. Prosecutors argued that Stephanie was guilty of premeditated murder, while Stephanie's defense attorney claimed she acted in self-defense. Prosecutors presented witnesses who testified that they saw Stephanie lose her temper and attack her fiancé multiple times. Stephanie's ex-husband, Michael, testified that she had confessed to him multiple times that Andrew Wagner had attacked her and hit her in the face. However, Michael never saw any bruises or injuries on her. A friend and co-worker at the nightclub where Stephanie worked stated that she often saw bruises on Stephanie's arms, which Stephanie covered up with makeup. Another friend, a dancer, recounted an incident where Andrew came to the club and got into a fight with Stephanie. After the fight, he sat on a bench and began drinking a cocktail that contained 2 bullets at the bottom of the glass. A co-worker informed security about this. But when they approached Andrew, the bullets were no longer in the glass. Stephanie's sister was called to testify in court. She stated that she had a close relationship with Stephanie and often discussed Stephanie's relationship with Andrew, whom she had met only 10 times. The sister observed bruises on Stephanie's legs, arms, face, and neck, and she believed that these injuries were caused by Andrew. Despite this, Stephanie continued to defend him to their family. Stephanie's sister shared another disturbing incident that occurred during a karaoke night with Stephanie and Andrew. During that night, the couple got into a fight due to Andrew's jealousy, and he attacked Stephanie in a bathroom stall. When she emerged, she was crying and her hair was disheveled. Stephanie begged her sister not to reveal what had happened. When they returned home, tensions flared again between Stephanie and Andrew, prompting her sister to comment on the bathroom fight. This remark only added to Andrew's anger, causing him to throw Stephanie to the ground and threaten her with a weapon. Fortunately, he soon released her. After the incident, Stephanie's sister urged her to break up with Andrew. Despite these events, neither of them reported the violence to the police. Stephanie reflected on what had happened. She felt confused and uncertain about her next steps, lacking money and housing. She lived with Andrew and endured his abuse. The judge found Stephanie Fernandez guilty of manslaughter, and she was sentenced to 10 years in prison. Her daughter, Angelina Fernandez, is now studying to become a psychologist. She looks forward to working in court, supporting victims and their families, and eagerly anticipates the day she can be reunited with her mother.